AC going.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Smudcast number 659, Resident Evil 4. And that is the 2005 edition. Didn't save the series. This is from Under the Mayo, a YouTuber we've covered before. We generally like his videos. He has some controversial takes, and that's what we're here to discuss. This is a 21-minute video. As usual, I doubt we'll get through it all, but we do have some fans of the Resident Evil series, especially 4. And we're getting some more coming on later as they get back from work or whatever they are. So this should be fun. I think we've covered his stuff with God of War, I believe.
The video in question, that video in question being God of War 1 isn't just a revenge story, which, yeah, there is more to it than just revenge.
And he covered more than just the
But
God of War
revenge
game.
really is the main thing there going there.
It's the main thing, but there's plenty of stuff that under the surface with the Greek God of War.
Plus
that we've talked about plenty.
The PSP games and the character analysis of Kratos. He's not just some murder hobo going around killing gods. So that was a great video, and a lot of fans already knew that, but it took this one YouTuber to go, listen, guys, before God of War was redone a few years ago, Kratos was still a good character to write stories about. He didn't need to have a remake, and they didn't have to redo the entire series for the modern era. And
now we can take it seriously. They had to
now
they just had to do a whole remake.
Yeah, they didn't have to change a lot and advance the character by 1,000 years or around there, if not more.
It's like the way I see the new God of War. It's just sort of, it's okay if you have to play. You can get it cheap.
At the very least.
Yeah. Okay. So I think we're all on the watch together. You guys are good to go.
Ready to go.
All right.
Like, just a heads up, he goes into a lot of numbers, like a lot of.
Yeah, I'm actually gonna actually find the source of those numbers. We can start the video while I look for it.
Yeah, there's another. I have another source that is relevant.
Yeah, I'll push them both so we can start.
All right, let's go.
There is a narrative that has existed for, almost 20 years now, that Resident Evil 4, the original on GameCube, released in January of 2005, saved Resident Evil from irrelevancy. The dying survival horror franchise needed an injection of new blood, and Resident Evil 4, which seemed to be following more conventional survival horror gameplay and camera style in the years before its release, judging by the early demos before it underwent the massive gameplay changes brought forth by the, at the time, revolutionary over-the-shoulder camera style, came in and saved the day, jettisoning the outdated and stale formula and presentation of the originals, replacing.
Yeah, I can see that actually being true because it brought more people into the franchise, whereas the original games have a very archaic style, but that was due to hardware limitations.
Well, the GameCube could definitely handle doing a cover shooter or a third-person shooter. I think it was the actual mechanics to combat that they said, okay, we're doing a survival horror. It feels a little clunky. We can do more. We could have melee attacks that's done. We could do more freedom of movement. You don't move like a tank anymore. So they were just maturing the existing controls for better technology. We have the capability.
That's what I was getting at. The controls of 1 through 3 are, outdated, but that is what added to the horror element was the rough controls. It put you more as you play the victim.
After a certain point, that specific element of the gameplay design was very much intentional for the sake of the atmosphere of the overall experience.
Yeah, and some people prefer the tank controls of the originals, and that's fair because it feels claustrophobic and you feel limited and, oh my God, what am I going to do with this little handgun that could barely kill a zombie with one shot? So to give Leon a bunch of maneuvers and tactics that you didn't have before is a bit more liberating, and it allows people to have more options of gameplay, which I think is usually a good thing. In this case, it worked out. So it could go.
It definitely got more people into the franchise.
Yeah, and Capcom has always been this arcadey style of game or company to make arcade style games, and to have their Resident Evil franchise to be more fluid, to be more open, makes more sense because arcades are for everyone. Everyone can play an arcade game. but it also opens up the genre. It's no longer just I'm in a claustrophobic room. It's like I have ways of escape. I have ways of attack. I have a variety of weapons. You still have item management, the same style. Now there's different mission types.
It's not as niche anymore.
It's not as by the numbers sort of this game design. There's just more we're giving it because the world of gaming, as we all know, is built off itself. So when you look at 2004? I think DICE came out. No, it was before that. Yeah, way before that. Yeah, like with Battlefield, you have all these big multiplayer games that are first-person shooter, different classes you can choose, different armaments. So it's like, okay, if we're going to do survival horror, we got to get the fans from other games or other genres that aren't too different and give them that control, or at least give them a control scheme that they're familiar with. It's like, oh, I can get into this game, no problem. It's fast. It's not as fast, but it's still fast compared to walking around very slowly like a tank. So there is something to be said of giving the user better controls to do whatever they want to do, moving, shooting, jumping, running, dodging, using melee, whatever the case may be. So I think it's always good to give the player, in whatever genre, more options for gameplay.
Absolutely.
It depends how you do it, of course. All right.
Like you can royally screw it up, Resident Evil 6.
Okay.
Ironically, 6 got rid of the tank controls.
Roller coaster action experience that kept the series alive. It was
Which is
only
what
because
we'd
Resident
get
Evil
in the
4
remakes.
so boldly changed directions that Resident Evil was not doomed to die a slow, agonizing death like its sister series, Silent Hill. But is this really the whole story?
it's a whole different
or is
story.
there more to this tale that
Silent Hill dying was... Well, that was Konami being Konami.
Yeah,
into
he
history?
uses
or
Silent Hill as
is
the
that
main.
propaganda?
He uses Silent Hill as like the main counter example of like, here's what RE4 was trying to avoid happening.
Yeah.
But like,
Which I
that's
guess
just
you
it's
could
such a more
say
complicated
there's
story.
You could say there's some truth to that, but there's a lot more to it than just they didn't
Yeah.
want to go out like Silent Hill did.
Yeah, no, Konami is a whole other ball game, which has nothing to do with listening to fans and more to do with business practices. So,
And it's a
Like
weird example
pachinko
here
machines.
because he says from the beginning that the first two Silent Hills, like, they got really famous, but they didn't do well. They didn't do all that well number-wise.
Like they got a cult following, but they didn't sell well.
fair enough, yeah.
Which is kind of how
It's easy to see how this
movies
version
and
of
games
history
go.
spreads and continues to this day. All we have to do is look at the sales history of the franchise.
Yeah, pause right there. That's linked in chat, and he cherry picks these numbers a lot in this video.
I don't know if Wikipedia is the best for this sort of data.
No, it's not. No, it's not Wikipedia. It's fandom.
Oh, okay.
Well, fandom is a wiki. It's a little more. It's just a little more. Well, it's mostly fans doing it, not. I don't know how to put it. It's not some corporate machine. It is just a group of dedicated fans.
What is this
Yeah,
sorted
running
by?
it.
This is
Yeah, these numbers do have validity to them.
Yeah, he
compared to-
explains it's not entirely accurate, but it's like the closest.
2000, 1999, 1998. Okay.
For those in the stream chat that want to check that out, I put it in there, so you can like follow along with us with the numbers, and it's also in the DM chat for anyone that wants to have that open just in case.
All right.
I have it on standby, so
Using fandom.com as my reference, and I'm not claiming that these numbers are absolutely accurate, but it'll be a fine general guide. I don't know how far they go into today, and the numbers you see here appear to just be general tracked sales and do not incorporate rentals, which we know were a big part of gaming in the 90s and 2000s. Hell, I rented RE1 twice before I bought it. It also doesn't account for used copies, which represent a lot of other players' experiences. So
That was
whatever
my
these
first
numbers
experience
are,
with the game.
they are conservative indicators of a game's success. Looking at the original trilogy, we
Yeah,
see
pause again. He goes all off numbers, but he leaves out like the critical reception to the games as well in a lot of cases.
Just because a game is popular doesn't mean it's going to keep selling or it's any good. So this is only for one platform, I assume, or is it every?
Yeah,
platform?
these are the like all together sales.
The lifetime sales of across all versions of the specific games.
Okay, I gotcha.
Which only track new copies of the game, not anything bought secondhand at a thrift store or used at a GameStop or
that
whatever.
would be really hard to track.
New copy retail sales for the most part.
Yeah, it's really hard to track that. I remember because all the data on, even in Canada, we had a bunch of different video game franchise stores that if you buy and sell used, yeah, that gets stored, but it doesn't mean that that's available to game companies to get that data, because at that point it's no longer theirs, it's the stores. So
yeah, I personally like Game Exchange, but that's more of a southern regional store in the southern United States.
Yeah, and plus when you're talking about used, it's based off of what you sold it as, what you bought it back as, and that's no longer profit. That's profit for the store. The publisher already made its money once it sold it to whoever wanted to buy it for distribution. So,
I mean, arguably, you could say that they made their money whenever they sold it to the main realtors, like new copies from GameStop or Walmart, Target,
plus
whatever other department store sells games.
Plus the differences in markup and sales of like 10% off this or that. So how much money was made is kind of arbitrary. And I've seen like copies of Konami games on eBay for like hundreds and hundreds of bucks in the shrink wrap. So it's like, okay, people still like these games that are 30 years old, but that doesn't contribute to sales. It's just,
I've seen some old GameCube games go for hundreds of dollars right there on a used game store shelf because it's, well, people have an attachment to them and they're hard and rare to come by.
Exactly. It's based off the number of units there are left, and there's just not that many units left. This is the opposite of what happened with E.T. Back in the day. They made way too many, and they just dumped them. So it's kind of like...
Which is kind of ironic now because, although ironically enough, if you have an unopened boxed copy of E.T. for the 2600, a collector is willing to pay a pretty penny for it, but that's more of a niche market.
Yeah, exactly. I always bring up Suikoden 1 and 2. Those are the big original, not original, but the first one was for the PSX, and they're going for hundreds of bucks. So the games are still popular, but they're not part of the sales. It's the same idea with cult followings for like Planescape Torment. Barely anyone bought that game, but everyone I talk to who likes adventure games or the isometric style of gameplay, they always bring that one up first. So popularity does not reflect sales, and a good game does not reflect popularity. And that's what it comes down to with all these fan groups that keep talking about how great Resident Evil is, how great the series is, how great other Capcom games are. So there's some crossover between the arcade style of game, the adventure style of game, the survival horror genre, which became its own thing through Resident Evil, that brings people together. And I think that's really cool with the Resident Evil series. And then you get all the, as we talked about before the stream, the corniness, the silliness, the B-movie style presentation, the giant, big, grandiose mansions and magical creatures and whatever else.
Now every time it ends the same way. You shoot a rocket at a blob.
I mean, Resident Evil, when you really think about it, has always been pretty stupid.
But that's part of the fun. I think that's the charm of this genre. It's the same like watching a Star Wars movie. You're not taking it too seriously. It's all melodrama. With Resident Evil, it pays homage to that style of horror, and works with, and runs with it in some cases. We get like Resident Evil Village and all these other really cool layouts and settings. So
Resident Evil started as a completely different franchise. The original Resident Evil is actually a remake of another Capcom game. I forget what it was called though.
Something Home, Sweet Home.
Something like that.
Well, Sweet Home, yeah.
Where it's a definite homage to a bunch of old horror B movies.
Yeah. And then through Resident Evil, we got Devil May Cry on accident. So people know the story of they sped up the frame rate of a Resident Evil run through, and they said, "Hey, this is really fun when it's fast." And they had an option.
I think it was supposed to be the original Resident Evil 3 or 4.
Yeah, it was supposed
Yeah,
to be
but it
4.
played so dramatically different. They just made its own franchise.
Which is brilliant.
Yeah.
Which is absolutely brilliant because through mistakes, and you say this is still fun. It doesn't matter what the mistake was, but the fact that someone took a game which is for a different audience, said, "Hey, we can make this for not necessarily the same audience, but we can make the same setting." Still, like to me as a Castlevania fan, that was perfect. I love this, and I would say that the Devil May Cry series, and then subsequently offshoots.
Sorry if you hear clashing. I'm cooking dinner while talking.
Oh, it's no problem.
Yeah, that's fine.
Do what you gotta do. So that probably appealed more to Castlevania fans than Castlevania did because it was so fun. It worked so well. So
Yeah.
At a point where Castlevania was being a bit more experimental as well, so the DMC took advantage of that situation as well.
definitely a problem with.
Personally, would love to see a hack and slash Castlevania game,
Well, there's several.
like one that doesn't suck ass.
I mean, Lords of Shadow is fine. It just doesn't compare to the 2D stuff.
Which
But,
Lords of Shadow?
Yes.
Okay. Anyway.
Okay.
Anyway, let's keep going.
Oh, and also it's like DMC made it as far as the third game of its series coming out the same year as Resident Evil 4, and that was DMC 3.
All right, let's go.
I didn't know too much
Tales
about
of
it.
5 to RE1 and RE2. And a note is that our first sign that the series was on its way to an early death? I don't think so. RE3 is a quality title and the favorite of many fans, like myself. And though it was originally conceived as a spin-off, they soon realized the potential the game had. And
Sure didn't know it was supposed to be a spinoff.
Is
No.
Is RE3 like the black sheep of the Resident Evil series? I'm not sure.
Not real. It depends on who you ask.
They
Like, I
didn't.
know there's Resident Evil spin-offs like Zero and Code Veronica, but I didn't
Main
know
series.
that 3
Those are main
started
series.
as a...
You know what? You say that, but this Under the Mayo makes that very same mistake of calling
Yeah.
those spin-offs when they're in the main series.
Yeah, a lot of people I think
Okay,
consider Code Veronica.
I think a lot of people confuse them with
Yeah.
as spin-offs.
Yeah,
No,
because-
if I can say for 3, it was originally going to be a spin-off, but they didn't make it 3 because they realized the potential it could have had. They made it 3 because Sony screwed them over with an exclusivity deal to release the numbered games just on PlayStation.
Well, look at how we look at the Final Fantasy series, and everyone knows some concept or one game of the Final Fantasy series. All the popular stuff, all what the general fans say is 7 is their favorite. That's what got them into it. All the hardcore fans say, no, 6 is the best. And I hear that consistently. Yes, people
And then weirdos like me that say 4.
4. Some people love 9. I've heard that a lot. So there's all kinds of appreciation of each game, but when it does something different, people pay attention. And I don't know about 3 too much. I haven't played it. I've heard people talk about it.
RE3?
Yeah, but people talk about 5. People talk about what they did with the zombies and how they try to wrap that around a more believable setting. And it's like, okay, well. 4 was
Also,
cool.
you have weirdos say that 5 is a racist, white supremacist
Exactly.
game, and it's like,
That's
no.
the news. That's the controversy again.
No, that's just a general idea of Resident Evil where they just go wherever the hell they want with and to
Basically.
tell a story they want to tell.
Yeah.
From my experience, people consider, if it comes to the black sheep, they think of Code Veronica as the black sheep, which is funny considering, I think, Genga, you said Code Veronica was supposed to be 3?
Yes, it was absolutely supposed to be 3 on the Dreamcast. But again, the Sony exclusivity deal where Sony wanted the numbered games on their system and nowhere else, they had to force Veronica to be a spin-off and for Nemesis to be 3.
Although,
Thankfully, it was
That
only
did-
for that one instance.
yeah, but we also got Resident Evil 3 on whatever it's called, the N64.
No, we didn't.
I thought there was isn't it?
It was,
sure
Resident
Resident
Evil-
Evil 3 is on N64.
Resident Evil
not
2
3.
was on
2.
N64.
It was just 2. In terms of the originals, it was just 2. 0 was supposed to be on the N64, but they moved it over to the GameCube.
Yeah, that's going to be
That's
important
probably for
later.
the best.
Yeah,
If I'm not mistaken, I think 0 is a retelling of the first game.
it's a prequel.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, either way, number 3 is part of the main series of games, and if you like it more than 4, I see no difference between liking Final Fantasy 6 over 7. 4 was the one that introduced it to the mainstream, I would say. So, but let's hear what he has to say, because everyone has a little nuance to this this argument.
Yes, absolutely.
He's going to play a massive numbers game here, and it's just a little
Yeah,
not referenced right.
exactly.
and gave it an official number in its title. While looking at the release date coming just 1 year after RE2 might lead you to think it was rushed, RE2 came out in January 1998 and RE3 in November 1999, so it was almost a full 2 years later. Plenty of time and passion was put into making that game the incredible and memorable experience that it was. If we just look at the PlayStation sales, and the PlayStation was Resident Evil's home from the very beginning, while RE3 didn't reach RE2's stellar sales, since RE2 was a phenomenon, it did outsell RE1 by 750,000 units, and was actually working with a disadvantage because RE1 received re-releases with the RE1 Director's Cut and the DualShock controller version, adding a huge 2 million more units to the sales figure, and the Director's Cut got a huge sales boost by including a playable demo for the upcoming RE2. And the RE2 DualShock version added another 800,000 to its already impressive 5 million. But RE3 had no such support. This kind of context matters.
Yeah, they stopped. I don't like how he says support. Like, those re-releases were special cases because it was because the PS1 didn't have analog support at first.
Yeah.
The GameCube re-releases for the series were Mikami and Capcom wanting to put the entire Resident Evil series on the GameCube in the lead up to 4.
Like, he calls it support.
4 was supposed to be a GameCube exclusive, wasn't it?
It is. Well, originally, yes, it was.
Mikami fought for that.
Yeah, to the point where it's like, I think I've talked about it before. When Mikami initially didn't want RE4 on the upcoming PS2 at the time, he had actually gone over to Microsoft first before going to Nintendo. And Microsoft's translator in that meeting...
Look who came crawling back.
Like, Microsoft's translator for that whole thing botched it completely and ruined any chance of 4 being on the original Xbox.
And then look who came crawling back.
Well, later, because they were able to put Resident Evil 4 on more consoles, and also the fact that 4 had proven itself already by the time it was on the 360.
Okay.
I just think it's kind of funny that they all came crawling back.
Yeah.
RE1's and RE2's sales were boosted by re-releases, RE1 especially, and of course the N64 version of RE2 adds a cool 300,000 to the total, while RE3 never released on the N64. I submit that while RE3's sales are still good, they could have been better if Capcom had simply pushed it more. They included a promotional demo with the release of Dino Crisis, and yeah, that's nice, but it's not a director's cut re-release or an N64 release.
There's actually a reason 3 didn't get put on the 64 either. It was because after 2 came out, Capcom had a huge, they wanted to push RE on every console out at the time.
Yeah, 2 was the one that sparked the idea of going to other systems, yes.
Because 2 was the height of the original series popularity. So Capcom was we got a real hit on our hands, and right after 2 came out, they had 4 different RE games in production. And their plan was, we want to spread RE out to everyone. So of those 4 games, each one was going to be an exclusive. So they had an exclusive made for PS1 already going, which turned into Resident Evil 3. They had an exclusive for the N64, which was 0.
It ended up being 2 and was also going to include 0, but again, moved to the GameCube.
Yeah, then that got moved to the GameCube because the developers were the cartridges on the 64 suck. And then they had the exclusive for the Dreamcast, which became Code Veronica. And then they had another exclusive for the upcoming GameCube, which was, of course, Resident Evil 4, which just ended up getting pushed back and delayed over and over again.
What also helped 4 is that, like I said before, they also put the entire rest of the series on the GameCube as well, being the remake of 1, 0, and then the re-releases of the other 3.
Yes, so he's saying that they should have just kept re-releasing it to get it more support. It didn't need support because the DualShock, it didn't need a DualShock release because by that time it already came with
3 was only ever originally planned for the PlayStation 1 because it was going to be just a spin-off. But Sony's interference changed that.
All right.
Sony.
Both of which could have had 4.5 million.
Oh, by the way, hey, how's it going, bad boy?
Good. Sorry I'm late.
That's okay. Glad we got you. Are you in the watch together? Everything's okay?
Yes.
All
yes,
right.
I am.
Good stuff. Let's keep going.
Yes, we're into a pretty big numbers game here.
Yep.
Million. So even with RE3 being at a disadvantage, it still held its own in sales, was received with open arms by the large majority of the RE community, and provided a sense of finality to the original series story. I do not believe it's an indicator of dying interest in the series format just because it didn't hit RE2's blockbuster numbers, partly due to a lack of post-launch support. Of course, there was more to explore after this, as Resident Evil Code Veronica takes RE2's Claire as she searches for her brother Chris from RE1, and this is where we start to see the real sales difference. Total sales less than RE3, despite releasing on multiple consoles, the Dreamcast in 2000 and the PlayStation 2 in 2001. We have to ask why the sales of CV were lower. Regardless of the game's quality, we have to factor in several things working against it. 1. Early years of new consoles, so you have a potentially smaller customer base to begin with. 2. It wasn't an official numbered title, and there are many people, like myself, that tend to avoid spin-offs and stick to only the official numbered games in the series.
That's not.
3. It released...
Again, it's not a spin-off.
Yeah, I don't think that's a
You want to know why?
Yeah,
you want to know why?
3 was supposed to be the spin-off.
Yes.
Sony's tomfoolery.
And also, Capcom doubled down on Veronica being part of the main series because you literally can't have Resident Evil 5 without Code Veronica. The reason why
a lot of people want Code Veronica to get Resident Evil 2 remake treatment.
Yeah, and because I think Bad Boy can confirm this. The reason for why Wesker is able to get away with making Ouroboros is because if I remember correctly, he combines Las Plagas with the crap that Alexia put into Steve near the end of Veronica.
Well,
I believe so. I don't have like the info in front of me, but I believe that's the reason. Because I think the reason he wanted the Code Veronica virus was because it allowed whoever it was injected with to control like other people that were like infected. So that's why Alexia was able to control like tentacles and stuff like that.
That's probably why Sadler could control the other Ganados.
Well, the Lost Plagas could do that naturally without any manipulation.
In regards to his argument about being a spin-off, if you're a fan of a franchise, you don't really care if it's a numbered game coming out next. You don't care about the subtitle. I don't really care too much about the gameplay. Let's say Final Fantasy Tactics. I still want to try it. I still want to play it. So that's kind of
I think Tactics got a re-release not too long ago.
Oh yeah, I got a War of the Lions on PSP and then it came out again. So it's people want to play a quality product from a company they trust. And it doesn't matter if it's numbered or named differently. If it's in the same world, same franchise or a denomination thereof, call it codename whatever. Like I'm gonna want to pick it up. So
and then there's Kingdom Hearts.
It's just she says regardless.
Oh God, Kingdom Hearts.
Regardless of the game's quality, which is weird because later he says quality becomes an important thing.
I mean, quality absolutely is important in game and any kind of development.
I would argue it's way more important in gaming because gaming is so big. Like people will go watch a film regardless of whether it sucks because it's the film. Whereas a game, you have like a dozen websites.
And that is a problem with the film industry.
Well, yeah, but it's same with a book. I want to get the next book from this author. I don't care what other people say. But a game, there's so many elements. And if you're off by one or two of them, that could ruin the entire experience. And you could find you trust a particularly good reviewer that you've known for years or whatever. So you listen to their opinion more than you would like the average IGN review or whatever. So that will obviously influence your desire to buy, and then you'll be like, okay, I'm just going to rent it. I'm just going to try it out. And that's what you do with Resident Evil games. You're like, oh, cool, I'll just check it out. Anyway, because I'm already at the game store, I'm going to get a movie, I'm going to get some whatever, and I'll pick up a game to play on the weekend. So it was like a normal thing you would do. Like you go out shopping and you just decide to get a pizza and a game. So yeah, we'd pick up the latest iteration of whatever is popular. And if you like it, you buy it. So we had that wonderful opportunity when games came out, you could rent before you buy. At least I did. I don't know about you guys. So
I never did game rentals much. I did movie rentals as a kid.
Yeah, but
I rented
Same.
games from Blockbuster.
But the games came out with the rental copy as soon as the game was released, as opposed to the film industry where you have to go to the theater to go watch it. So it was kind of natural to try before you buy anyway. It was just save yourself $50 or whatever it was. So
Kind of like what we see with game demos now.
The demos, or in my case, on a small handful of occasions, if I'm unsure whether or not to buy a game, I pirate it first, and if I like it, then I buy it.
there you go.
But I buy it.
Yeah, exactly. Okay.
Just
Maybe don't admit that on
RE3
stream.
came out, so there's a bit of
I
market
still buy it.
oversaturation happening. And 4, the hype of this launch was likely dampered a bit by exclusively launching on the Dreamcast, when Resident Evil was a strong Sony brand for 4 years.
Says who?
That's a weird
I
argument.
don't agree with Brand saying that.
Yes, it started on PlayStation. Yes, it did numbers there. But once Resident Evil started to diverge to other systems, it was still doing fine. It's not like it only did numbers on PlayStation.
Yeah, just when I hear Brand, I think of it was exclusive to PS1, but it
And no, it wasn't.
obviously wasn't.
It never
When I
was.
think of
Maybe one, because until the remake, one. Well, not even one. One was on the Saturn. So
Yeah, it was. It's just like
So it
when
was
I
never
hear Brand,
exclusive.
I think of like Crash and Spyro because their games were exclusive to the PlayStation.
Although the story with that is because they had Naughty Dog and Insomniac had to go through Universal's
Universal.
Yeah, they had to go through Universal's game publishing division to get the games they wanted to get out there.
And we have to realize the Dreamcast only had a lifespan of, what, 2 or 3 years? So,
Yeah,
Yeah,
It-
Dreamcast was a commercial failure.
yes.
the PS2 grinded the Dreamcast into the ground.
Yeah, so the console
And then
wars
the
were a
game,
thing.
of course, so did the GameCube and Xbox. Like Dreamcast didn't stand a chance.
Yeah.
In fact, I don't even remember seeing Dreamcast games at the store growing up. I was only PlayStation, Xbox, and GameCube.
They were a niche. Like I remember Panzer Dragoon and all these other specific, like Ikaruga, all these games like were just for Dreamcast. It's like, wow, Dreamcast has a lot of cool games, but it was like, could you find them anywhere? No, not really.
Well, that's partially why also Sonic Adventure 1 and 2 made the move to the GameCube right after they came out on the Dreamcast, because even Sega realized, yeah, this shit's gonna die.
Yeah, so it was a height of the console war between Sega and Nintendo. Sega lost. People kind of got that vibe as the PlayStation got bigger and bigger. And Nintendo,
PlayStation brute forced its way into the industry because of a falling out with Nintendo. If you remember the Nintendo PlayStation bullshit.
Yeah, that was a mistake, wasn't it? Wasn't it, Nintendo?
That and then by the turn of the century, Microsoft pretty much dove headfirst into that
exactly.
era, and that started essentially the current console war between Nintendo, Sony, and Microsoft.
Can you imagine?
Although at this point with the Switch, Nintendo's in a whole other league altogether.
Yeah, can you imagine being
Nintendo's
Sega
just kind of doing their own thing off on the side.
Yes.
In 2001, you're getting destroyed by PlayStation. All of a sudden, Microsoft, the biggest software manufacturer in the world, releases its own console. You're like, oh, forget about it. So it kind of makes sense that Sega goes, yeah, we're not going to do hardware anymore. And sorry about that. And I always talk to people who loved the Dreamcast. They say it was my favorite console for what it was worth. The same people talk about like the GameCube's their favorite console or whatever. So it's.
I think what was it, the 5th console generation was the PS2 era?
6th.
6th. The GameCube was the more powerful of the consoles. It had the highest graphic resolution.
Yeah, it was
Didn't
the
mean
best
shit on
console.
the tiny. It didn't mean shit with them tiny little discs, but it
Yeah, thanks.
was the most powerful console at the
the
time.
mini discs.
Ironically.
Thanks Panasonic.
I
They made those with Panasonic for the sake of anti-piracy, and yeah, it still didn't work.
Which is
anything
ironically Panasonic would actually release a DVD GameCube combo. So it's like, what's the point?
Yeah, that was made as an additional clause in the agreement for making the mini disc format in the first place. It was still, and also I don't think it got a global release. I think it was a more restricted release.
I think it was mostly Europe that was released in.
Yeah, it was the Panasonic Q.
Like I know it's not region locked, but I think it was a European release.
Yeah, it goes for a pretty penny though.
Oh yeah, it's a.
All right, so I think we covered that topic of the console wars pretty well.
Yeah, and to go back to the Dreamcast exclusivity in terms of Resident Evil, in terms of the exclusivity, Resident Evil from the beginning was not exclusive. Yes, it made the most numbers on PlayStation, but even that prospect was starting to diminish by the time they were at least conceiving Resident Evil 4.
Like, yeah, from the beginning, their plan was never to have it exclusive to one.
Yeah, every game in the series up to Resident Evil 4 was at least on one other system, and then after 4 they realized we can put the series on more than one system at the same time, which is why 5 was a simultaneous release. I think 5 was the first. Yeah, 5 was the first simultaneous release for the series.
I don't know if 5 was critical. I know 5 was hated upon release, and then 6 came out.
And then 6 was even worse.
Okay,
It's like, you know what? Maybe 5 isn't so bad.
Let's keep going.
Just look at how the PS2 release of Code Veronica the next year actually has more sales than the Dreamcast version, where it was exclusively available for a while.
And it had more content.
Yep.
It reintroduced Wesker into the main story. People were going to pay attention to that.
Yeah, they actually introduced him earlier in the story. And one thing I don't understand is like when they introduce him, like in the original game, they introduce him, but they have something blocking the back of his head, so you can't see who it is. So it's supposed to like it's supposed to keep the mystery going. Yeah. But then in the PS2 version,
we know for a fact it's Wesker.
Right, but that was in the Dreamcast version. In the PlayStation version, they introduced him even earlier, and he beats the crap out of Claire Redfield. Yeah, because and then they still have that scene where his head is blocked. It's like, we know who it is.
Yeah.
So it's like, why did you keep this in here?
If I remember correctly, Veronica was the first game in the series that took advantage and actually added new story content for the sake of expanding on things.
Yes. I believe so, yes.
It gave most of the new content, and most of the new story content was just giving Wesker more screen time in preparation for his return to the series, which would end up being in 5, but that's a whole other thing.
Yeah.
All right.
Was a far better selling console than the Dreamcast. These numbers right here are a sign that at the time, Resident Evil was a Sony brand. And that information will be important later. But releasing on PlayStation doesn't guarantee instant success. Other RE spin-off titles fared much worse, with poor reviews and poorer sales. And the strongest of the...
Well, Survivor was gimped right out of the gate because of Columbine.
Yeah.
I don't even know what Resident Evil Survivor is.
It's a like, first-person shooter.
Wasn't that
It's kind of
their multiplayer shooter they made?
No, that was Outbreak. Yeah.
Survivor was
also failed.
Yeah, Survivor was kind of like a Virtua Cop Time Crisis kind of thing.
Yeah, it was a first-person shooter that was released exclusively. I don't know if exclusively, but on the PlayStation 1, as it was, in its final days. The PlayStation.
Yeah, Survivor 1 was gimped by Columbine. That was an original story that was honestly hot garbage. The second Survivor was just a retelling of Code Veronica with Nemesis there for no fucking reason.
And it was a first-person shooter as well.
That as well, yeah. And then the third gun Survivor was Dead Aim, which I think to this day is... I think, at the very least, it has the advantage of, if I remember correctly, Dead Aim is technically still canon.
Why?
Because it vaguely connects...
Resident Evil has a weird fucking timeline.
And then 4, I don't know anything about Survivor 4. Wasn't it that one, I think about was Dino Crisis related?
What?
Okay.
I think.
I know
don't really know.
Dinosaurs? There's dinosaurs in Resident Evil?
No.
Well,
Dino Crisis is a separate series.
Yeah, well, they actually had an Easter egg in Dino Crisis that referenced Umbrella. Like if you go to like a certain area in the first Dino Crisis game, you can find some crates that have the Umbrella logo on them, and people like oh my god, they're connected. It's like, no, it's just an Easter egg.
That is just an Easter egg.
Yeah.
Yeah. Survivor was not all that worth it, except maybe Dead Aim, because that's the one
that was
that
short too.
Survivor
was short, very short. You could beat Survivor in an hour.
Exactly. And then Outbreak.
You said that was a PS1 title?
Survivor,
yes. Yeah. I actually rented it.
PlayStation 1. That's not uncommon for PlayStation 1 titles to be pretty short.
Oh.
All right.
And then Outbreak, which is meant to be just the main series of Resident Evil, but multiplayer, which they can absolutely do now with the RE engine.
Yeah, that's a game they should remake.
Yeah. This
Outbreak.
is literally just take the engine, the RE engine from Reverse, and just use that to remake Outbreak. That's it.
Yeah,
that's it. But yeah, it's like generally, like the secondary titles of Resident Evil did not fare as well as the main series. And again, Veronica is part of the main series. Let's just plant that flag right now.
Well, I got a question for you, Ginga. Do you consider Resident Evil Revelations a remaster or a remake?
No, Revelations 1 and 2 are separate stories that are canon.
Yeah, they're not remakes or remasters.
I thought Revelations were remakes of the original the first one.
Well, the story of Revelations calls back to the mansion, but that's more in a meta sense.
Yeah, and I've heard people say that, like, Revelations 2 is essentially, a rebranded Code Veronica, essentially. Claire's kidnapped, she's taken to an island. Well, in a sense. In
a way, yeah. Yeah, kind of.
Yes. But not like copy and pasted,
Yeah, and if we also want to factor in Revelations 1 and 2's sales, Revelations 1, as of now, has just under 4 million. Revelations 2 has just over 4 million. If you also want to...
Those are pretty good numbers for spin-offs.
If you want to... Yeah, those are more spin-offs than things like Code Veronica. Again, Veronica is part of the main series.
Again, for some reason I thought Revelations was a remake of the first game.
No, they're integrals. Revelations 1 is between 4 and 5, and Revelations 2 is between 5 and 6, if I remember correctly.
I believe so, yeah.
Okay.
It just plays a lot like the original game.
And Outbreak, the series' first multiplayer adventure, sold fine in their time, but there was no title making people scream, "Resident Evil is back on top." The series was doing okay, but not like it was in the glory days of 96 to 99. Meanwhile, in the years of 1999 to the early 2000s, a new survival horror series was rising to stardom. Silent Hill, the breakout surprise hit from Konami trying to capitalize on Resident Evil's success. And they did. Silent Hill sold a couple million copies and earned its place as one of the greats. But even though the sequel in 2001 is critically acclaimed and considered by many to be the best in the series, even the best horror game of all time, it didn't sell very well. Not the big numbers they were expecting.
I find it weird he doesn't bring up actual data here.
Yeah, a lot of people talk about
that's weird. You'd think he'd show the sales records to back that claim up.
Yeah, when I talk to fans of Silent Hill series, they always talk about 2. So,
I mean, he's right. Resident Evil 2 is the most popular Resident Evil. Silent Hill 2 is the most popular Silent Hill.
Silent Hill 2 is still considered the best horror game ever.
Yeah. I think isn't there supposed to be a remake of Silent Hill 1 coming out?
Silent Hill 2.
And a live action.
Oh, it's a remake of Silent Hill 2.
Adaptation.
You're right. Yeah.
Oh boy.
And they're remaking Alone in the Dark as well too.
Oh jeez.
Oh, that's
I thought Alone in the Dark died a miserable death not that long ago, like PS3 era's generation.
Yeah, back then, but now they're doing a remake of it. Of the first one.
Don't give the first one that look. Just don't.
Anyway.
Don't give the 4 remaining fans of that series any hope,
Anyway.
Konami.
Yeah.
It's weird to me because earlier he says quality, regardless of quality, the Code Veronica didn't sell particularly well because of these issues. But then he's like, "This is super quality," but then doesn't show numbers about it.
Yeah, that is weird. And Code Veronica didn't sell well because it got screwed.
Yeah, the between being on the Dreamcast, which on its own isn't a problem, but then you also factor in the bullshit Sony deal for the numbered games, which changed plans for Capcom when it came to that game.
Of course, all Capcom had to do was tell them to stick it and make Resident Evil 3 Code Veronica.
Well, which they did. They did tell them to stick it with the remake of 1.
All right, let's keep going.
Fewer than Silent Hill 1, and sales continued to fall, with the excellent Silent Hill 3 doing even worse.
Can you show me numbers?
Quality started to decline, other studios took control.
I guess it's possible he just doesn't have the sales records, and he's just going off word of mouth.
15 years or so. Silent Hill isn't a legendary series because it sold
Yeah, there's not
millions.
much for Silent Hill.
It's legendary because of how it elevated horror games and how influential and special it was. It was never going to be as big as Resident Evil due to its bizarre cult storylines and twisted psychological horrors of sacrifice, sex, and murder. And Konami mismanaged the series as a publisher that didn't even really understand what they had. But why am I talking about
Well, that's
Silent
just
Hill?
Konami in a nutshell,
It's because
isn't it?
we have to consider the argument that Resident Evil 4 didn't just bring back a dying Resident Evil franchise, but that survival horror as a genre was on the way out. With Code Veronica and Outbreak not rising to even RE3's numbers, and the Silent Hill franchise petering out quickly, maybe there's a degree of truth to the idea that RE4 was desperately needed to bring Resident Evil back into major success.
Yes.
It's an interesting argument, but not one that I think holds a lot of weight, because I tend to see Resident Evil as something independent from genre trends. The numbered entries are always successful.
Well, I mean, Resident
For
Evil.
better or for worse.
Resident Evil created a lot of those genre trends for survival horror.
It created a
that's
lot of the
fine.
tropes. It created a lot of the gimmicks.
Well, yeah, but you're talking about a video game which is based off a B-movie platform of horror, and it's just making gameplay mechanics for that. So the suffocating atmosphere, the feeling of dread, the darkness, like all these elements that you find in film, they replicated with gameplay mechanics. So when 4 comes around and they make it so it's more compatible with the average player who likes third-person or first-person shooters, thinking, hey, I could play this now. I'm no longer walking like a tank. That's a big step. That's a big deal to a lot of players who just can't get into Resident Evil. So
Yeah, and generally, classic Resident Evil very directly channeled the George Romero Night of the Living Dead. That was the backbone of classic Resident Evil for a
Also,
good long
Alone in
while.
the Dark.
Alone in the Dark, and also as we mentioned earlier, RE1 being basically a spiritual successor to Sweet Home.
Yeah, so to say
Mikami
that,
said that himself.
Well,
right?
it's like I said earlier, the original Resident Evil is a remake of Capcom's Sweet Home, which Sweet Home was exclusively released in Japan and just pays homage to a lot of old horror movies.
which
Like
is,
Night of the Living Dead.
which is kind of strange to say because games follow trends, whether they're genre or otherwise. They all steal from each other, and that's how you get people into your new game. If you want to talk about sales figures and how it works and mechanics, you borrow this from that game and this from another game, or this from that film, or this story from that character and another story. This is
inspiration.
This is how the creative process works, especially in video games. So to say it doesn't borrow, it steals trends. Games just blatantly take ideas and mechanics from other games, and they don't ask whether it's patented or not. They don't care. So gaming is very much like that. The gaming is very much part of trends, genre trends, especially Resident Evil.
Yeah, I mean, everyone was copying the third person over the shoulder after.
Yeah, 4 was the one that 4 was literally the game that pioneered that gameplay style.
Yep.
Like directly. It's
Well,
like
for survival
anything.
horror. I mean, there were other third-person shooters, but I don't think any of them had controls as quite as good as Resident Evil 4.
Well, to the point where literally when Dead Space 1 came out, they outright admitted that Resident Evil 4 was their biggest inspiration.
They were like, the idea was Resident Evil 4, but it's in space.
Yeah, literally. So, Resident Evil, you could argue Resident Evil, defied trends and did its own thing, but that also leads into ultimately Resident Evil itself creating plenty of trends and gimmicks and styles on its own. Yeah. It did a lot in its own way as well.
Yeah, this is 2 years after the release of Kill Switch. If you guys remember Kill Switch, it was the first game to have cover shooting. Was it on the N64?
I mean, I've heard of it. I didn't know it was the first game to have cover shooting.
Wouldn't that have made it 2003?
Let me look that up. Let me look that up. Kill Switch.
Was it N64? I can't remember. I remember going to game school, and this is like the big deal. This game that no one heard of that did cover shooting. You play a cop or whatever. It's like, okay, and that was, 2 years before 2005, I think. So everyone was inspired by
October of 2003. October of 2003, it came out on the PS2 first.
PS2, okay, fair enough. So that was sort of the...
I said I've heard of it, but I've never played it or
Exactly. Everyone's like,
seen anyone really talk about it. It's just like
Yeah,
I've
I
just
have it-
seen it in passing at a game store.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I have it here. PS2, Xbox, Dreamcast, PC.
It was on Dreamcast.
It was on the GBA as well.
Yeah, so,
Yeah, so it's like
PBA had a lot of things it had no business having.
Yeah, Kill Switch is another like Genesis situation in the gaming industry. That's the one that's the even though it's not that much remembered now. It's like Kill Switch was one of the first major examples of cover shooting, at least the way we know it now. Just like how Resident Evil 4 was for the third-person shooter aspect.
Right. So this is the kind of thing that there's a game that does something that no one really knows about. It didn't get marketed well, didn't get bought very well, but game designers go, "Oh, look at that. We can take that idea and we can implement that into our engine and we can make it work very well." And so that happens all the time, whether it's a map system, an RPG mechanic, it doesn't really matter. And then you see the gamification or the RPGification of other games that had no business being RPGs. Now everything's an RPG. It's the same with manga. You've got gamification of every genre of storytelling for all audiences, whether you're getting isekai to another world, whether you're getting reverse isekai, that monsters are coming to you. It doesn't really matter. You're having these multi-genre experiences, and that just attracts more people to your story or to your game.
Well, now at this point, to the point where we have like literally the gamification of things from the Bible, like El Shaddai or Darksiders.
Oh,
and
mythology. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, mythology. Yeah, things like the Bible, Greek mythology, Norse mythology. Yeah, all that. And Darksiders is a specific example that I also want to highlight in terms of this whole topic before we keep going in the video. Is like Darksiders directly takes from games like Zelda and like God of War, but
I was about to say that. Like,
it's not ashamed of it. It wears those influences on its sleeve, and in some aspects, improves on those games with its own shit.
Yeah, so I think
a lot of people give Darksiders crap for using elements from Zelda and God of War, and it's like
was on
games
purpose.
borrow elements from other games. Like that's always been a thing.
Yeah,
And again, just like
you can raise an eyebrow over the gun he gets that fires red and blue portals, but.
The Voidwalker item, yeah, that's very clearly Portal inspired because that was during the time where Portal was just that big. But I'm just saying, like, Darksiders made it a point to wear its Zelda and God of War influences on its sleeve with no shame.
Well,
and shame should be held for that. Those are great games.
Anyway.
And I would dare say, and I would dare say before we go back to the video, that even some of the dungeons in Darksiders 1 and 2 are better than some dungeons in Zelda itself. So
don't bother with Darksiders 3. Just don't.
Well, the
I will. Fuck you.
The point is, under the Mayo is not addressing that every game that comes out, especially in a series, has to innovate, and it does that by stealing, or it does that by coming up with something new or evolving an existing mechanic. So
the latter being what Resident Evil 4 did.
It's natural, and unless he makes an argument for it not evolving or not using a genre idea, it's like, no, it's always been that way. Games have always been that way in general. Let's be more specific with your argument here, sir, and let's keep going.
The original trilogy sold well. RE4, 5, and 6 sold really well. RE7, Village, the remakes have all been doing great numbers. I don't think it matters what's popular at the time. Resident Evil is simply a powerhouse that manifests its own success when it stays focused and doesn't dilute its brand with constant spin-offs.
But you want to bet?
Fair. That's a fair point.
That is a fair point, but looks at RE6.
Nobody likes Resident Evil 6.
No one, not a single soul.
Oh yeah,
Nope.
he
I
avoided.
don't even think Capcom likes Resident Evil 6.
Yeah, in that list, he doesn't bring up 0.
6 goes against his argument because
Zero's
6
a good
did
argument.
very much care. 6 did very much care what was popular at the time and tried to take bits of everything and tried to amalgamate too hard.
Yeah, what did he say? He said the mainline, the numbered entries are always
main
successful.
series.
Yeah, he
In terms
doesn't.
of sales,
He shows the list. He doesn't for this whole video, except for one time. He completely avoids bringing up RE0. And there's no reason to, because he uses fandom as a source, and he basically crops it out. It's right, the numbers for it are there. He just doesn't show them. And it's a numbered, and it's even more important because Zero came out in the same year as the RE1 remake.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a popular game as well. People love Zero, so
I think he doesn't bring up Zero in this because it directly contradicts his argument coming forward, which is that the GameCube screwed them, and Zero's numbers are noticeably lower than the RE1 remake.
Yeah, but this is the thing about fans that we always talk about. Even though this is a very popular franchise, we mentioned I mentioned Final Fantasy. Yeah, the hardcore fans love 6. The same with the hardcore fans loving 0. There's something about the gameplay, the challenge, that is somehow better than compared to the other Resident Evil games. So it's like, oh, the fans get it. Is it going to sell as much? Not necessarily, but they prefer that style. Yeah,
it's just his focus in this argument is about the numbers, and he just avoids the numbers with Zero.
Yeah, the argument ad populum is never a good one to showcase whether something is good. It's whether or not...
Yeah, just because something's popular doesn't mean it's good.
It's whether or not,
exactly.
It's whether or not it's successful enough to constitute saying, let's make more. So that's the problem with doing something innovative like KOTOR 2 or Planescape Torment that doesn't sell very well, but everyone keeps playing these games. So anyway.
Why do you think I have such an obsession with cult classics that aren't necessarily widely remembered but are still good games?
Yeah, we still talk about New Vegas. We still talk about, I'm trying to remember.
Fallout New Vegas is insanely popular and actually did sell pretty well.
Alpha Protocol is another decent example, and that's almost completely lost to time.
That's a great example because that's also a Sega property, and they really did it dirty to the creators of that game, and they wouldn't pay the license for the music. There's only 2 or 3 licensed pieces of music they would not spend on it. It's I'm playing it right now. I play it today.
God damn it.
I play it today.
Yeah, usually developers would just make new music, but Sega sometimes just makes dumbass decisions.
Yeah, so
they really do.
Is through piracy because they discontinued it on Steam. So
it's abandonware, so anyone can find it and play it. I have no qualms about that.
So yeah, Sega is a bit weird when it comes to understanding I'd say the world market. Their Japanese mentality, the same with Konami, is a bit narrow-minded or narrow-sighted. And there's obviously a demand. Even Chris Avallone and the people who made the game are like, we want to do more. We really liked making this game. It was really awesome. There's nothing else like it on the market. There is no other spy stealth RPG out there that I could think of that does what Alpha Protocol does. And the same with Resident Evil. There's really no franchise that is as big and robust and has all the gameplay mechanics and history that Rez has, including Silent Hill. So it's all we got.
When they come out, this is the next big official Resident Evil, the audience is always there. Whether it's heart-racing, explosive action, or slow...
When he says it's always there.
Brooding horror.
The audience is always there.
The mainline entries in the series always do well, for almost 30 years at this point. Now, how does this all tie to our main topic of RE4 saving the series? Well, some of you may remember that in the GameCube era, Capcom signed an exclusivity deal to develop 5 games for the Nintendo console. One of those games being the eventual Resident Evil 4.
Does it mention there why?
The Capcom 5.
Because of the source, I think it's in the screenshot in the chat.
Well, I think that screenshot is Wikipedia. I think.
Well, I meant in the Discord. The reason Capcom did this exclusivity deal was because they were just trying to port RE to every known console, and then they turned around and they said, you know what? We want fans to be able to have one console where they can play all of the RE games on. And that's why they did an exclusivity deal.
The Capcom 5 was a 2-part deal. One was to make 5 exclusive games for the GameCube, being Resident Evil 4, Beautiful Joe, Killer 7, Piano 3, and the unreleased Dead Phoenix. The second part was porting the entire rest of the RE series to the GameCube in the lead up to 4.
Yeah, they wanted
Yeah, they wanted the whole
Joe
series
would be made by who was it? Clover Studios, which is now I think Platinum Games.
They were originally Team Beautiful. They were a production studio in Capcom that decided to individualize itself as Clover.
Which they are the ones who became
Platinum, yes.
Platinum Games.
And Mikami was the one who really was the force behind wanting the mainline entries exclusive.
He was
Sorry about switching on y'all like that. I just got done with dinner, cooking dinner, so I'm on my computer now.
Okay. Yeah, Mikami was the one that very definitively spearheaded the Capcom 5 deal. On both sides of that deal. And with the exception of Dead Phoenix, it worked out pretty well.
All right. We are 9 minutes in. We're going to go for a few more minutes. I'm not sure. I mean, he's not making a bad video. He's just missing some arguments, unfortunately.
A lot of context.
Yeah.
No, we got to do the whole thing. Let's go.
But Shinji
can do
Mikami,
it.
director of the original Resident Evil and RE4, entered a separate deal with Nintendo for the development of a bold remake of Resident Evil 1. And that remake has gone on to be considered by many fans of the originals to be the best game in the entire series, the definitive Resident Evil experience, and the gold standard of survival horror for all time.
So now
a
quality
straight
matters.
up undebatable masterpiece.
I've never actually
that
played it.
still
Like I
looks
said, I've
and
only ever
plays
played
great
4.
today.
It is definitely, it's like now at this point it's definitely worth playing the remake of 1 without question.
Yeah.
And there's other context to it that they wanted. The reason Mikami shot for a remake of 1 and 2 and 3 just got ports to GameCube was because he thought 1 was too outdated in its graphics to just do a straight port to GameCube.
Exactly.
So the intention was never, hey, let's remake the first 3 to GameCube. The intention was always, let's just port them.
Yeah, 1.
But Mikami personally didn't want 1 to be ported like that.
So he went and touched him up to actually make them run proper.
Yes, and the remake of 1 was completely independent from the Capcom 5 deal. He pushed for that himself. He pushed the remake. He pushed the remake himself. And then the rest of the deal followed suit.
All right.
20 remaster. And this is the point in the video where I ask you to remember what I said just a while ago when talking about Code Veronica launching on the Dreamcast. The PlayStation was Resident Evil's home. That's where it was born. And now a stunning high-quality remake of the original classic PlayStation game, something destined to be a massive hit, was released.
How would it be destined?
Let's let him finish at least.
On a Nintendo console, the weakest selling main Nintendo console until the Wii U, only selling 22 million units worldwide, even being discontinued in 2007, just 6.5 years after its release, while the PlayStation 2 had sold 50 million in North America alone.
Now, I personally don't like that he brings this up because these are figures from 2009.
Not to mention, console sales aren't really relevant to a game remake.
Yeah, this is unfair.
Yeah, it's like if he should have showed figures like from when the remake was coming out. Because if I remember right, when GameCube at the beginning, like both PS2 and GameCube were actually selling neck and neck.
Mm-hmm. And also having things like Resident Evil and Eternal Darkness, for that matter, had a massive knockdown effect on what Nintendo would end up allowing on their consoles.
Now Nintendo pretty much just does
on to sell
whoever
150 million units in
whoever wants to put something on their system most of the time. Yes.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at.
March 2002 saw the release of the incredible RE1 remake.
What else was in 2002? He just avoids 0. It pisses me off.
Already been out and going strong for 1.5 years at that point. The GameCube had only been out for 6 months. In 2002, nobody had a GameCube, and if they did, they certainly didn't get one expecting to play survival horror games that originated on the PlayStation. I didn't have a GameCube, I had a PlayStation 2, because I loved Metal Gear Solid, Resident Evil, Silent Hill, and Twisted Metal, and I assumed the PlayStation 2 would be where those series continued. So imagine my surprise when I walked into my local GameStop in 2002 and saw a TV advertising a Resident Evil remake. It looked amazing. It looked real. My mind was blown. I had to have it, but they told me it was a GameCube exclusive. So I saved up and bought a GameCube for that one game. I'm wondering how many of you did the same. I'm willing to bet a nice little chunk of those RE1 remake sales came from people who simply forked over the cash to get a GameCube.
Or people who just already had a GameCube.
Yeah, I'm just like, what's wrong with a game like this getting you into the GameCube? The GameCube, I would argue, had the best game library of that generation.
Also, isn't it fly in his face?
It's point like GameCube had some hiccups here and there, but arguably it has some of the best games to come out of that generation.
Yeah, and also, you Mayo, you waiting for the RE remake to come to PS2, only for it to come out on the GameCube. That's a little thing called suck it.
Well, he also forgot, if he's buying a GameCube for Resident Evil, I think you guys mentioned
he still has the whole series on there too.
Yeah, he forgets about Zero, which also came out. So if you're thinking of, I'm going to buy a console just for one game, it's like they have a second game. Like you have other options. So
then they got
literally the entire main series up to 4. That's literally the very reason why Mikami pushed for putting the series up to 4 on the GameCube.
Yeah.
And he just said earlier, the audience is always there. So why does it matter if it's on the GameCube?
Exactly. And even if it's not there, it makes a new audience with the Nintendo fans, which it did, especially when 4 came out.
And wasn't it being broadcast? Like he says, he just didn't know it was going to be on. Like that whole exclusivity.
That he was surprised to find out that the remake was going to release on the GameCube back then.
Yeah, that whole deal should have been like reported on, right? Or like something.
I think it might have been touched on a little bit. It wasn't until years later where we had all the details, though. But yeah, but everything was in place for the deal to take full effect.
All right.
Idea behind exclusives, right? They drive console sales. But not every RE fan is going to do that, or even could do that. I'm a minority case. I enjoyed the RE1 remake more than any game maybe in my life at that point, but I didn't think too much about whether it was successful or not. Turns out it wasn't, selling only 1.3 million units on GameCube, and the disappointing sales for RE1 remake are commonly cited as the final
and Zero.
Hold on. Selling over 1 million units in its total life of a game.
What are the numbers on Zero?
That's actually really impressive.
It's literally right below this on fandom, but he doesn't bring up Zero. The numbers on Zero are
1.25 million.
I'm looking up Resident Evil remake total sale. Resident.
No. Well, it's in the DM chat. I put it in the DM chat to have the sales for the whole series.
Yeah, 2002. Yeah. Zero came out a few months after RE remake on GameCube, and its sales were like 100,000 less.
Yeah, the
2002 remake of Resident Evil really sold 1.35 million copies in its lifetime. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Like, that's not a failure by any stretch of the word.
Especially considering
it's a remake.
And the slightly shorter lifespan of the GameCube, because the Wii came out in 2006.
Yeah, the lifetime sales are like 4 million, but that's up until today, I assume.
Yeah, accounting for all versions, yes.
That's impressive. For the the remake of 4 has already hit 4 million. That's gonna get added at some point as well. But going back to this, just over 1 million throughout the entire lifetime of the GameCube is not all that bad. Metroid Prime 1 made just over 1 million just in America on the GameCube, and that's not considered a failure either.
And again, he said earlier
that's also partially kind of a remake. Yeah, the Prime remaster is actually really good for anyone.
No. Okay, yeah, no, you're right about that. I'm just talking about the original GameCube release, which was the very same year as the Resident Evil remake. That Prime is not considered a failure on the GameCube either, and that made over 1 million just in the US on the GameCube. So this isn't a failure, at least for the GameCube. This isn't a failure.
Yes, remember, this is also the 2000s. Gaming wasn't really as big then as it is now.
it was getting to that point.
It was
absolutely,
getting to that point, but gaming was still seen as just kind of a niche hobby that a collection of nerds do. Instead of seeing now, it's people make their living off of gaming. People make tens of thousands of dollars live streaming on Twitch, wearing freaking kitty ears and a French maid outfit.
Well, even going as far back as
PewDiePie is a weird guy, but he's making big money doing that.
we can even go as far back as when James Rolfe started as the angry video game nerd. Well, angry Nintendo nerd, but you get my point. He started his whole thing in the 2000s when gaming was, I would dare say, in an expansionary period in terms of the mainstream. That was definitely a turning point for the industry. And to go back to the video again, just over 1 million on the GameCube is by no means a failure.
To change direction from slow, spooky survival horror game to rip and tear action and carnage and hunting for treasure.
Mikami wanted to do this.
RE4 saved a dying
And it really did make... I really do like the fact that Resident Evil 4 is more action-focused.
Yeah, first of all, it was relatively needed after classic RE was starting to get stale at that point, 0 being the last game before 4. So that one proved the
quality
point.
of it, but like he leaves out critical reception of the games, which is like, yeah, they were...
That also plays a big factor, yeah.
Yeah, they were the critic scores were good even when it came out, but you also got responses of like, you guys, this just feels like the same thing over and over again.
Which, relatively speaking, it was.
People are still borrowing from Resident Evil 4 and making survival horror.
But there's also many more developers that have also been borrowing as much, if not more, from classic Resident Evil as well, mainly in the indie scene.
Absolutely. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, Resident Evil has defined survival horror.
The thing with when it came to 4, it's like classic Resident Evil, I think we can agree, it had the classic formula had overstayed its welcome, at least a little bit. And also, the thing is, Mikami had foreseen that, and that's why they made the switch with 4.
That's why 4 is such a dramatic change, but it is a change for the better.
And I harp on 0 because, as posted in the Smudcast chat, is an excerpt from an interview with Mikami and the other guy, Koyabashi, is that how you say his?
We can look at. I think we can look at that right before we go to the memes. But that is also a key piece of why things turned out for the series the way they did.
Yeah, Mikami himself saying after 0-2, because 0 was right after the RE remake, they wanted to recreate the series because it felt like the team was just making the same thing over and over again.
And they succeeded with 4. So let's continue on, because I think he is just about to get to 4, at least with the numbers.
This was only dying because Capcom sabotaged it by releasing the RE1 remake on a console no one owned while their fan base was over on the PS2.
You just said the audience is always there.
Yeah, the audience is always there, and it wasn't sabotage. Mikami and Capcom wanted to take these risks. But let's keep going with the point here.
If they'd simply made the RE1 remake for the PS2 like they should have, it would have been huge.
Maybe.
We never would have had this bullshit story about how no one wanted classic-style Resident Evil games anymore. And we would have gotten the remakes of 2 and 3
no,
that
you
the
wouldn't
fans
have.
desperately wanted after seeing the quality of the RE1 remake.
I really doubt that, because we have remakes of 2 and 3 now. I know people are really mixed on the Resident Evil 3 remake. People love the Resident Evil 2 remake, and I really like the Resident Evil 4 remake.
Yeah, the reason why
I do want to get the remake of 2 now.
Yeah, the reason why
it's actually on sale on Xbox right now. You can get the Resident Evil 2 and 3 remakes for $15 on the Xbox store right now.
Okay, yeah.
I'm going to do that in a little bit.
Yeah, and the reason why only now we got the remakes of 2, 3, and now 4 is because it had been mandate for the longest time that 1 was the only one to get a remake and nothing else. It took years for Capcom to finally turn that over.
When he says remakes,
fans have been demanding remakes of Resident Evil, up to Resident Evil 4 for a while.
Yeah.
When he says remakes, he specifically means
Nobody wants them to remake Resident Evil 5 and 6, though. I mean,
Yeah,
granted,
I think
those are far more recent games that are still widely available right now. Like, you
Well,
can GameStop and pick up
well,
Resident Evil 5 and 6 for
it feels
PS4
like-
right now.
Yeah, just
It,
stop.
it feels like they're gonna try to remake Resident Evil 5 now with
No.
Resident Evil 4. Well,
Why?
it's
Well,
implied.
There's no point.
Hold on. If I can say why, because just recently, thanks to the current era, people have gone back to things like 5 and some of the spin-offs and have looked better on them. 5 has more attention now than it ever got when it was when it launched. So why would they
Yeah.
sacrifice
That's
that
why
for Will?
Well, it's
that's
with a
why
implied.
they remake it.
I'm just saying it's implied that 5 might be getting the next remake based on what we saw in the RE4 remake.
I
Oh,
really
they-
don't,
with-
I don't
with-
think a remake is necessary.
Well,
Maybe a
between-
remaster, tone up the graphics and port it to the next console generation.
Yeah.
I think a proper
Exactly.
remaster where you tighten the controls up would be more in line with it.
Yeah, which
They're
that
just in
my
too deep
argument.
at this point.
Yeah, which
If
I
they, wanted,
just
if
think,
they wanted to do a dedicated remake to any Resident Evil, it probably should be Code Veronica.
yeah, that one's
Agreed,
also
agreed.
important to the story. And I would also say remake some spin-offs, some early spin-offs that really didn't get that much attention. Again, I think Outbreak at this point can work.
Yes, absolutely. One of the things they need to do with Outbreak is they need to drop that whole what was it, the commands, like the list of commands that like each of the characters have, like like you press a button, they say come on or over here. They didn't have voice chat in Outbreak.
Oh, was that the multiplayer one?
Yes,
Okay,
that's the
yeah.
multiplayer one. They didn't have voice chat. Like you had like a pre-programmed list of commands.
Yeah, it was so
like,
bad.
come over here, item over here.
It was so bad. I can say
the
this.
commands would still be good because
For
when you're in
single player,
online
yeah.
chats, you're not always going to have a party member who speaks your language.
Well, that's
Well,
the
right,
mechanic
but-
from
So it's like
Sony.
just having a general emote
Mhm.
saying, hey, over here, there's a thing over there, there's a fuckhead on the left. Like, just have some general commands to convey
As a compromise.
communication, like if there's a language barrier.
Yeah,
Right.
but now in a current age of multiplayer gaming, Outbreak can absolutely work.
Oh,
absolutely.
And it's like, yeah, things like that, and then and other like lesser spin-offs from the classic era, that they have the RE engine ready to go to bring that all into the modern age.
Yep.
Which is and this whole thing is like, this is a symptom of the larger larger issue, you could say, issue of the fact that, again, like I said earlier, this is all of this remake talk is a direct result of the fact that one was the only one that was ever going to get a remake at first.
So he says because of fan expectations, but the fact is behind the scenes, it was never they never intended to do a remake for all three.
Yeah, people
One was
wanted
going to be a
them,
port.
but people wanted them, but there was no plan for it at all because, again, like we said earlier, Mikami only ever wanted the first one remade because of being outdated.
All right.
2 and 3, the old 2 and 3 still hold up,
Okay.
which is what led to that decision. So let's continue.
keep going.
Original, all because Capcom and Shinji Mikami wanted to publish on GameCube.
Never got
You
and
can
never
hear
were
I'm
going to
being a
get
little
until recently.
intense. I'm sorry. This is an emotional subject for me because to
Emotional.
this day, I'm bitter about not getting GameCube remakes for RE2 and 3
Oh,
And
boo!
RE4 is
Get over it.
But you can get
And he
Resident Evil
blames
2
Resident
and
Evil
3
Get
remakes
over
on
it.
current
I'm just like, hold
console
on.
generations.
Is
I'm
that-
just like, yeah, I'm
that-
just like, oh, boo-hoo, fucking Sony fanboy didn't
Yeah.
get the games he wanted.
That's what it sounds like. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm a Sony fan. Like, yes, I know I fully criticize Sony's dumbass decisions going on right now.
This-
But
That's
this is the
basically the
same-
reason for this video.
Yeah, this is the
I'm
same
glad,
problem with
but here's
exclusivity.
the thing,
People
I don't
always
want
argue.
the Resident Evil 4 remake to be exclusive to PlayStation 5 or PlayStation 4. I don't want it exclusive to PlayStation. I'm glad it's on the Xbox. I'm glad it's on PC because more people get to play a great game.
So yeah, we mentioned the console war earlier. This part of his argument is pretty much a direct result of the console war.
Like, could they have remade Resident Evil, the original, make the original remake for PlayStation 2 and Xbox? Yeah, they probably could have.
But that wasn't what they planned. Because they already had
That's not
Resident Evil.
what
They already had Resident Evil fans in the bag on PlayStation. The Capcom 5, that one half of the deal where the entire series up to 4 was on the GameCube, they wanted to take that risk to get more people into the series so that when they went completely multi-platform, they had that base set.
Exactly.
terms of the
they
fans.
Like, sure, they could have ported it over. They could have put the dedicated remake on PlayStation 2 and Xbox, but they didn't. It's not the end of the world.
They ported 4 over, but that's because that was the big hit at that point in time for the series. Nothing else was going to get ported to the PS2 except Code Veronica, which was already there. But the point stands that the reason why 4 got the port after it was released on GameCube was because it was the one selling. It was the one that was selling. It was the one that was getting the most word of mouth, the highest critical reception, because that was the plan all along. The only reason why it was on the PS2 is because Mikami bit the bullet and swallowed his pride and put it on the PS2 because he knew for a fact, despite his plans, the PS2 was going to give the game more numbers.
Absolutely. And also with the PlayStation 2 port, we had the Separate Ways expansion.
Yes, they took advantage of that re-release, and like with Code Veronica, they added more content to expand the lore.
Which gave a proper explanation to why the hell the Illuminados wanted Luis Serra.
And then guess what? They made it up to Nintendo fans with that by then bringing it back to Nintendo on the Wii with the extra content and getting even more numbers.
With probably the best controls of Resident Evil 4 of any edition.
I would say, aside from the remake, the Wii version is the best version. Without question.
Of the original game, Wii is the best version.
Yeah.
The remake is just a completely different fish altogether.
Different beast,
It's different beast. It's not really, it doesn't make sense to compare the two. They're both great for different reasons.
Yeah, and now to go back to the video, he's basically complaining that he had console loyalty, which is the cardinal sin of the console war.
Like, I don't really see issues with being loyal to a console. Like, yeah, you buy a console, buy games for it.
Yeah, but he's proven that he was loyal to the PS2 to the point of being so goddamn petty that he never got the remake. The remakes that he wanted, that he never got the RE1 remake.
The modern equivalent of this is people who want everything on Steam. They won't go to Epic. They won't go to any other online retailer because everything has to be under their only whatever platform they want.
That just makes monopolies. That's why I'm adamantly against Xbox buying out Activision, because it's more than just Call of Duty. It's also the Spyro games. It's Toys for Bob. Activision owns a lot of shit.
All right.
Fair point.
Let's keep going.
It's why GOT, as amazing as I believe it is, still stings a bit because the original never got the treatment that RE1
That's being petty.
will never get.
That is absolutely
and it's why
petty. Like, could they remake the original game again? Yeah, probably, and you could bet your ass people would buy it.
I don't think it should have happened though, but it's like
maybe a port or a remaster of the remake. Just take the remake on GameCube, touch up the graphics.
Well, it's already on Steam. It's already on Steam.
Oh, it's on Steam. Well,
it's already on Steam.
It's on Steam. I'm going to buy it on Steam.
Well, guys, we've had porting software for over a decade, which can not a press of a button, but you can take console code and port that over to another console in a matter of hours. It's not impossible.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's to the point where recently we've also had, it's like after the major Nintendo leak for a whole bunch of N64 stuff, that's part of why all these decompilation projects have started up for some of the best games on the N64, like Mario 64, Ocarina of Time, Paper Mario. It's like I kind of like the logical evolution of that mindset of that whole thing.
Yeah, that's the indie people who can take apart stuff that's 20 years old. Not to say it's legal, but they're allowed to do that because they own the product.
It is, well, the decompilation projects are legal because they don't give you a ROM, and they give you all of the tools and code that you need to do it yourself.
Yeah,
any bastard on the internet can do it.
Right.
It's basically, here's some tools, build your own game.
It's legal.
The chipset is all simulated because our hardware is way better than it was 20 years ago. And
you could argue the only illegal thing going on is they're selling somebody else's product codes, but there's so many things you can put that into and recreate in like Source or
that's the
Unreal Engine. Like you can buy a game making engine on the internet and make your own game.
What ends up happening is they get this code, people re-release it for free, and the original producer says, "Hey, this is still being played by a niche select audience, let's make another game in that franchise. And that's partially what's happening with some of these 16-bit games and the Fire Emblem series and a bunch of others, where they just keep making more. I had no idea Fire Emblem was so popular.
Fire Emblem is.
But
I have some very, very mixed opinion about modern Fire Emblem.
Yeah, but because there's all these re-releases of games through the communities that dump these ROMs out for emulator, people are like, hey, people are still playing these games. So it encourages
Metroid.
Oh God, for sure.
Metroid. The whole reason why we have Metroid Dread is because AM2R brought attention to the series again.
Like, I really need to finish Metroid Dread.
Is it Fire Emblem a Nintendo exclusive?
Yes, through I think
Intelligent Systems.
Yeah, but the Intelligent Systems is, I believe, first party Nintendo. But yeah, so yeah,
I was going to mention the total creation of the Chrono Trigger Resurrection, I think it was called. And that was canceled because it's a whole other game based off a franchise. You had no legal right to do so. But that just shows you how popular the 90s era was for Square and people wanting more content. And they still haven't released another Chrono Trigger.
Yeah, well, that's the whole reason why fans do all these kinds of projects, whether it's remaking, remastering, fan games, decompilation.
That's why I'm going to say, if you're going to make a fan game, try not to use the name of the fan game you're making.
Well, then what's the goddamn point?
I say inspired by insert game here, then it's homage, and developers can't touch you.
No, the AM2R proves that you need the name, because without that, we wouldn't have Dread.
True. But I'm saying there are ways around game studios that are more restrictive of their IPs.
And yet Nintendo still brought Metroid back.
Yeah.
That being said, can someone make an F-Zero thing, please, so we can have that back, too?
Okay.
What would you do if Nintendo just ignored the F-Zero because they just don't care about it?
Well, that's a discussion for another day.
Still stings a bit because the original never got the treatment that RE1 did. We'll never get it.
Petty, moving on.
And it's why so many of us are incredibly upset about how bad the RE3 remake is. It's not just a case of a game we love being remade. That happens all the time. If you don't like the Dead Space remake, then forget about it. It's not like fans were clamoring for one anyway.
I disagree.
Except they were. Except I've heard the Dead Space remake is actually really good.
Wait a
I
second.
just disagree with that. Yeah.
He just said it's bad for Resident Evil 3, but it's okay for Dead Space because you can just forget about it.
A lot of people
except fans.
Proper port of the original Dead Space because the original game doesn't launch on Steam because the game's engine is not compatible with Windows 8 or higher.
I was gonna say, isn't the old version of Dead Space technically spaghetti code?
I have no idea.
Thank you.
What are you saying, bad boy?
Like I said, they got a proper remake and people really like the remake.
Generally,
the original game, it won't launch on Steam because it was entirely dependent on Windows XP. It'll run on XP, it'll run on Vista, it'll probably run on... Well, actually, no, it won't run on Windows 8 because Windows 8 no longer has support of... Steam is no longer supported on Windows 8 because it's just abandoned. Windows 8 was terrible.
I was going to say...
But 7...
I was going to say...
I don't know.
Resident Evil fans were clamoring for a remake of Resident Evil 3, and right after Resident Evil 2 Remake came out. And Capcom was like, well, okay, we'll give it to you if you guys really want it.
And they did.
And RE fans were like, yes, of course, we really want it. And they're like, okay, then you're going to get it. And this is what we got. And we're like, this is shit. You've cut a bunch of stuff out of it. And Capcom's like, well, you guys asked for it.
Yeah.
Like, it feels rushed. The Resident Evil 4
it is very rushed.
The Resident Evil 4 remake cut out a bit, but it changed enough to where what was cut doesn't matter. And the one part that was cut that bothers me is actually really petty. They cut out it while you were in the chasms. That literally served no point to the story, so it doesn't need to be there. I just kind of like
with regards to that boss fight, some people are theorizing that you get to fight it as Ada. That's the theory right now.
They did tease separate ways at the end of Resident Evil 4 It's like, this is where we go our
stupid.
separate ways. Like, yeah, that's really corny and stupid.
Oh, I
but
forgot about
this
that.
is Resident
was
Evil
stupid
4.
as hell.
Of course,
Yeah.
it's corny and stupid.
Yeah, generally
Like, that doesn't bother me. Like, so yeah, if we're getting separate ways, I have no doubt about that. So
Oh,
that's
yeah,
probably where
definitely.
it's gonna be.
They set up too much in the RE4 remake for them not to do a separate ways DLC. There's way too much setup.
That, and after a certain point, we've always had that content. So to cut it now would be ridiculous.
It would be
Even if they-
disastrous.
even
It would be
if they-
disastrous for Capcom to do that.
Because
If they sell it for like
because
10,
that's
15
canon.
bucks, people will still want it.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
it's like Separate Ways is canon in its own right, and I think what was the rumor that they were that supposedly someone said that they were gonna that they cut U3 to give Ada something more to do.
Well, I think it's also implied if you watch like the cutscenes again, she also fights one of Salazar's bodyguards. I think it's implied.
Yeah, but
'Cause
Leon already fights one.
Right, he fights one, but like you see her in a
because there was
cutscene
only-
looking at one of the bodyguards, and it's carrying Ashley, and she kind of like
there was
moves
one of
towards it.
Yeah,
So
one
it's
of the
it's
bodyguards
implied
was
that
missing.
she's gonna fight that thing.
Yeah, there was one of the bodyguards missing from the Salazar fight.
Right, it
'cause you had
disappears
to-
completely.
In the original game, you had to fight Salazar and deal with his left hand because he detached his right hand to dispose of you.
Yeah.
Your right hand comes off.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
the point is with the RE4 remake, to Mayo's point, like the RE4 remake did a little bit of the content cutting as well, but it wasn't as severe. In
Like, the
3's
one-
case,
stuff
it
that they
was
cut in 4 doesn't really matter.
yeah, it's not like the bulk of it like with 3.
Or what he just said
That's
about
the real issue with the 3 remake.
he said about Dead Space remake. I remember like after RE2 remake came out, because I'm a pretty big Dead Space fan. Like people were talking like, man, I hope our Dead Space 1 at least gets this treatment. And it's just people wanted one, but they never in a million years thought EA was actually going to do anything with the franchise.
And apparently, it's really good.
Because
People
it's
really like
It is a really good game, yeah.
And you can still and Dead Space 2 still runs just fine on modern machines.
And I'm just like, of course, people didn't take that thought seriously at first because it's EA.
Oh
yeah, I mean, after they closed
If you're
Visceral,
gonna
everyone
play-
assumed they weren't going to do anything again.
If you're gonna play Jedi Survivor, play it on console. It's a poorly optimized PC port.
Well, gee, I wonder where I've heard that before.
Oh,
What did he just say about if it's a remake, you can just forget about it?
That it's like that. Okay, I think it's
Game
here.
we love being remade, that happens all the time. If you don't like the Dead Space remake, then forget about it. It's not like fans were clamoring for one anyway. But
Yes, they
fans
were.
of RE3 and 2 were fully expecting Capcom to continue with the GameCube remakes
We
because
can
of
just
how
forget about it.
No, we weren't. It was only ever meant to be one.
whenever we got the Left 4 Dead 2 remake, people were ecstatic because holy shit, we're getting a remake of a
Back 4 Blood.
beloved game
Wait.
from my childhood, beloved game from when I was in my teens.
Oh,
And
that
it's
was a remake?
I cannot talk today. The Resident Evil 2 remake is actually really good from what everyone says. You can get
It
the
is.
Resident Evil 2 Raccoon Edition, which is 2 and 3 for $15 right now on Xbox. I'm doing that after this stream.
Another issue with the 2 and 3 remakes that I want to point out is that unlike the remake of 1, the ones for 2 and 3 are not the canon versions. Are still not the canon versions. That goes to the originals.
I think
Yeah.
you guys mentioned in a past video
2 is especially bad.
that you talked
With the
about the
canon,
RE
yes.
Remakes endings
Yeah.
not being canon or something.
What was that? I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
Well, like I think and like you guys covered another Resident Evil 4 video. You talked about the endings of RE1 remake, how none of them.
Oh
are
yeah.
RE1 in general. RE1 in general. It's like where you can never play a version of RE1. You can't play a version of RE1 that gives you the canon ending.
Where
That's
everybody
weird.
survives.
That's
I think the Resident Evil 4 remake ending does align with the canon because
Yeah.
Leon goes off with Ashley and Ada goes off to do Ada things.
Yeah, the key detail was Ada getting the sample of Las Plagas to Wesker. That had to happen no matter what because that leads into.
I thought that she gave him a fake copy and she was there by the government to get
she gave
the government to
He
weaponize.
gave him a slave sample, and then Wesker went back to get an actual sample that he wanted, from Krauser's corpse.
Oh yeah, because they gave Krauser a proper explanation as to what he's doing there. He's just
I actually like that. I like that. Well,
the Krauser boss fight, both of them are actually really good.
Ada
Unlike in the original Resident Evil 4, where your knife fight with Krauser is just a cutscene with QuickTime events, this is an actual knife fight.
Yes.
All right, let's continue.
Yep.
Incredible. It was our dream to see remakes of RE2 and 3 happen.
Yours, maybe.
But they never came, and they just ported the originals to the GameCube instead.
That was the plan.
So just forget about it.
Exactly, all according to plan, according to Mikami and Capcom at the time. So what's the big deal?
I guess you could argue it is a disappointment that they went to that much effort for Resident Evil 1, but not 2 or 3. But again, you still got 2 and 3.
Again, because Resident Evil 1 was Mikami's baby. And he wasn't going to do it dirty.
Yeah, when you do look back and compare the PS1 RE1 to 2, there's a definite
It's night and day.
The models look much better in 2.
You want to know what gave people so much hope for 2 and 3 remakes back then? Is because of that one section in RE0 where you go through like the subway station as Rebecca, and you go down to the laboratory where the last bit of 2 takes place, and where Rebecca goes to get back together with Enrico. It's like that's ripped straight out of RE2. That was the first clue. That was the first sign of people wanting that 2 remake back then.
Disappointed for about 17 years.
That's
and
you.
Then to see RE3 finally remade and it turns out like this, well, maybe that helps you understand why people hate it so much.
Just forget about it.
And why some old school fans were upset about the RE2 remake not having an angular camera, instead going for RE4's over-the-shoulder perspective.
And people like it.
Wow, I was gonna say, wow, way to punch down at Resident Evil 4, jackass.
People like the fact that Resident Evil 2 and 3 remake play like Resident Evil 4. People like that.
Instead going for the over-the-shoulder perspective of Resident Evil 4. Yeah, way to punch down.
That's what
he hasn't
people
even
like
gotten
about
into
it.
the numbers yet.
That's what people like about those remakes. Even though people hate the Resident Evil 3 remake, they like how well it actually plays.
Yes.
They just see it as the inferior version.
Yeah.
Getting a GameCube remake. So Capcom kneecapped the remake by deciding to publish it.
No, they didn't. No, they didn't.
Also, how are they kneecap it if the audience is always there? Like
Exactly.
you said, for the main
how is
game.
this Resident Evil 4 didn't save the series? At this point, you're just kind of bitching about Resident Evil 2 and 3 not getting proper remakes.
Yeah, bitching about the fact that classic Resident Evil didn't continue into the 2000s. Is that if classic or Resident Evil was left to continue without the changes RE4 brought to the table, Resident Evil would absolutely be a dead series. Like it or not, Resident Evil 4 kept the series going.
Yeah, for better or for worse. For better and for worse.
Smash Brothers, and then RE4 changes direction, possibly as a reaction to the poor sales, but also largely because they were playing with a new camera system that allowed for precision aiming, which...
What is
and
that?
also because
it is good.
Got bored.
And it was good.
What does that have to do with the problems of whatever he was talking about? Because they're having a new game mechanic, therefore bad? Like, what are you talking about?
That is literally what he said. That is basically how it's coming off.
And he says, a little bit back.
And then RE4 changes direction, possibly as a reaction to the poor sales, but
also because of reaction to Zero, which was just a few months after.
But also
it was all reaction to the series getting stale.
A camera system that allowed for precision aiming, which led them to lean into the action direction. RE4 came out and it was a critical darling. Game
What a
of the
dumbass
year,
wasting
hailed
his
as a
flash grenade.
masterpiece,
Don't you know
and
those are
rightfully
useful
so.
against the
I
parasite
loved
zombies?
RE4 and
Well, this is the very start of the game, but moving on.
played the hell out of
Just
it.
being a jackass.
But was it really the success that Capcom needed it to be after the disappointing RE1 remake and RE0 from 2002? It wasn't, not if you look at the numbers.
No.
RE1 remake sold 1.3 million on GameCube.
Which is pretty
What about
impressive.
Zero?
RE4 sold 1.6. That's not a huge improvement, considering it's one of the
Now compare Zero.
greatest and most
It's an
important games
improvement.
of all time.
It's still an
Its
improvement, and those
success
are
was
still
found-
impressive numbers.
Yes,
Yeah.
let's continue the point here.
with the release on PlayStation 2 later that year. A move they should have pulled
That's
with
not
the
much of an
RE1
improvement.
remake as well. But no, they left it to die on the GameCube instead. Shinji Mikami
Fuck
famously
you.
protested the porting of RE4 to the PS2, but Capcom rightly made the move because they had a potential hit on their hands being limited by the GameCube install base.
No, not rightly.
No,
It's because despite Mikami's hatred for Sony, the game was going to make numbers.
Like,
So what's the
Resident
point
Evil
here?
4
They can just
was
keep
a
porting
hit
it to get
on the
more numbers?
GameCube.
It was a hit.
PlayStation 2 had more console sales, so it made sense to put it over there.
Yeah, the bigger install base. That's just business. He wanted to establish.
You can use that same argument to say the Resident Evil 1 remake could have been ported over to PlayStation. You can make that same argument for that. But it doesn't matter.
Yeah, my guess is this is what he based the one remake thing on because after remake 1, 4 would set the precedent for that.
Yeah, you could make the argument that they could have ported the 1 remake over to PlayStation 2 alongside Resident Evil 4 because there was the install base there. People would want it.
But that wasn't
that's
the point.
not what happened. You just have to accept that.
Yeah, that's
you have
not
to accept that games you love sometimes just aren't going to go onto your favorite game console.
Yeah, they deliberately kept the entire series up to 4 on the GameCube and then ported 4 over to the PS2 to start expanding the series' scope again.
And why were you talking shit? Why is he talking shit about the friggin' 4 port to the Wii? That's the best version of the original game.
Yeah, it made $2 million.
I have a question. Does Resident Evil 4, is it possible to download that onto your PlayStation 2 or 3?
No, their PlayStation 3 maybe. PlayStation 2 did not have an online store.
Yeah, I think. Oh wait, 3 wasn't the
I owned it on PS2.
Wasn't the PS3 PSN store shut down recently?
A while back.
So.
I think I think they were going to shut it down a while back.
It got delayed.
It got delayed. It may be down now. I don't know.
But even then, your best chance is still Steam and the PS4 and Xbox One. In terms of the console releases, those are the best way.
Right. I'm just comparing it to like for PS4 and 5, where you can nowadays you can download directly onto the console as opposed to using a disc.
Well, I think you could with PlayStation 3, but just I think
speaking of,
it's just that store is no longer active.
Speaking of, the PS3 and 360 version of RE4 made another just over $1 million in 2012. And then on PS4 and Xbox One, it made almost another $3 million in 2016.
And guess what? It's on the Switch, and it's doing just fine over there, too.
Resident Evil 4 is the new Skyrim, apparently.
Resident Evil 4 is Capcom's Skyrim.
Yes, and as of now, up to 2016, in terms of versions, like he showed earlier, Resident Evil 4 has a combined total of just over 12 million. Not counting Switch, not counting the remake.
There was Resident Evil 4 got ported onto a game system that only had like 12 games ever released for it.
Yeah. And still did numbers.
Yeah, I just looked up Resident Evil 4 on the Steam store. It's like $5 right now.
Is it on sale or is that the permanent price?
It's on sale. The regular price is like $20, but it's on sale for like next 18 hours.
So I recommend to anyone, just to spite this asshole in the video,
that's the original and that's the original Resident Evil 4, not the remake.
Yeah, that's the original, and that's the ultimate HD version. Which, aside from the Wii version, that is another one of the best versions of the old game.
There are 11 versions of the original Resident Evil 4.
Yeah. There's no shame in admitting that, despite what this guy's saying, yes, in a way, Resident Evil did save the franchise. It's the first game in this entire list of games that made of games in the sales page to break 10 million. 4 definitely made an impact in the series, and this guy seems to be like he's just dancing around it for the sake of just playing classic or Resident Evil.
The argument could be made that the series wasn't dying, but you can't argue it's not the most popular.
This Resident Evil 4 Classic is on GameCube, PlayStation 2, Windows, Wii, iOS operating systems, PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, Android, PlayStation 4, Xbox One, Nintendo
Steam.
Switch, Oculus Quest 2, and whatever the fuck a Zeebo is.
And not to mention everything the remakes on.
Exactly. What the hell is a Zeebo? Yeah, this is the
No,
it was a 3G enabled entertainment and education system from Zeebo Incorporated. It enabled users to play video games and also connected to the internet to communicate online and run educational applications. It was in Brazil and Mexico.
Okay, now to go back to this, again, this was all part of Mikami and Capcom's plan for the Resident Evil series to get as wide of a base as possible on as many systems as possible across all of the games so that they can get the biggest base possible buying their game.
Apparently the original Sonic Adventure and Tekken 2 were on the Zeebo.
Well, the argument is that, or the concept of this video is that the Resident Evil series was somehow in some capacity dying, and 4 was the one that brought it back. When in reality, they were gonna keep making Resident Evil games. They don't have a very long development cycle. They know how to make them, and I would argue they wouldn't have done as well if they kept the same format. That would have probably killed it. But because 4 innovated and everyone loved that innovation, they can keep making games like that because the audience is broader now. The mechanics are more acceptable to the third-person, first-person shooter group, and that made it sell very well. The problems therein after the fact were other issues outside of game mechanics. You could argue, you guys know better why 5 and 6 weren't so hot. So you could still make that argument that, yeah, it actually brought the series back into the limelight in the highest way possible.
Yes. Yes.
Agreed.
And if they kept using that innovation path of, okay, what can we make? How can we make gameplay better for the players so that they don't feel as weak as possible or as claustrophobic as possible? Not to say that you want to get rid of those elements, but you want to be able to manipulate them, because that's what video games are. You're manipulating the game world in a fun and creative way. So, yes, keep the inventory system. Everyone seems to like that sort of management concept. Yes, keep the third-person cover shooting or not cover shooting, but the targeting mechanics. Some people don't like the auto aim, but it doesn't hurt gameplay too much.
Auto aim.
When you target at a certain appendage, it sort of defaults to parts of the.
No, it does. It does still leave it to your own aim.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. Well, that's part of what made it good as well. And again, this maybe as one could argue that the reason why the series fell off again after 4 was because, well, Mikami left after 4, and that's when the series went to shit for a little bit.
I mean, or you could argue it only went to shit with Resident Evil 6. 5 was just kind of mediocre.
Well, 5 was just the first sign.
Yeah.
Well,
However, people don't hate 5 as much now as they did when it first released.
That's why 6. That's because 6 exists.
I believe the aim feature came out in the remake of 4, but I could be wrong.
The what? Wait, what?
The aim assist. I don't know what you call auto aim, whatever you want to call that mechanic.
That became more of a thing in the remakes. Yeah, starting with the
in RE2 remake.
Yeah, see, that's where the hardcore fans are like, we don't like this. We want full control.
Yeah, that's a more modern thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So
yeah.
that
was an option too.
Yeah, you can turn it off, but that's the thing. Like, that's the hardcore argument. It's like, we don't want those elements, but the bigger demographic will say, well, we like that because it makes the game easier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Anyway, we're 5 minutes almost ready to finish off this.
Less than 5 minutes. Let's do it.
Let's do this.
Another 2.3 million on PS2, and then another 2 million on the Wii.
That is an improvement, but moving on.
2 years later. And even still, the numbers at that point, considering the GameCube, Wii, and even PS2, don't even match Resident Evil 2 from 1998.
That's still neck and neck, though.
Like, I get that a couple 100,000 is a big number, but when it comes to sales, it doesn't matter. Like, that's really friggin' close. Not to mention, now factor in the modern releases of the game on Steam, Switch, Xbox, and PlayStation 4.
Yeah, it's at the very least, Resident Evil 4, with those first 3 versions, at the very least surpasses the PS1 version of 2. At least. But again, this is still really close, though, and also take in literally every other version of Resident Evil 4 as well. which doubles what 2 did.
Which is millions more sales RE4 got came much later, with the eventual releases on PS3 and Xbox 360 in 2012, PC in 2014,
Oh, look, Barry talks
and
about
PS4 and Xbox One in 2016, eventually putting its reported total here over 12 million in its lifetime.
Double of Resident Evil 2. Twice of
impressive.
Yes.
Even in this argument, though, the people who play these games know that they like the mechanics, they like the concepts more in 4 than they do in 2, and it doesn't have to sell more than the other. That's not relevant. Is it the more fun experience? Is it the better Resident Evil experience?
4 is, yes.
Right. So it's like, okay, yeah, it sold more. We know why, but we don't know exactly how the marketing worked. We don't know exactly how the marketing worked for the previous games. Like, you're comparing a lot of different elements over the course of at least 9 years between games. So we're talking about different scenarios, different hardware, different software, different game mechanics. Who knows? Maybe the next Resident Evil is going to just blow them all out of the water for a different, mechanic for whatever. Like, we don't know. But we don't need sales figures to prove this. This is, again, I do not like the argument ad populum unless he's talking about Resident Evil needs to make a lot of money so they can keep making Resident Evil games. It's like, yes, that's true. Or Capcom can just take money from elsewhere and keep making Resident Evil games. So what does he mean by saving the series? Was the series just boring? Was it dull? Was the story going nowhere?
The game. It was mainly the gameplay formula, the tank controls, the fixed camera, the all the game mechanics that involved in that. It's like there was a pattern forming, and that pattern was starting to get the series was getting that pattern revealed that the series was getting stale, doing mostly the same thing.
Yeah, when you saw
mechanic wise, it was the same game over and over and over again.
Yeah, we saw the copycats like Silent Hill and Fatal Frame and all these other horror genres that did their own magical thing.
Well, Fatal Frame still kept going. It's the main. Let's just take Silent Hill. That one did relatively the same thing. That's why that one fell by the wayside.
Yeah, they were focusing more on the narrative and the characters, and that's
the psychological aspect.
That's great. Yeah, that's totally fine. That's why people like Silent Hill. It doesn't need a sequel. It doesn't need extra versions of itself.
The problem is that they didn't take steps forward like Resident Evil did with 4.
Right, and Resident Evil wanted to innovate. It wanted to do more. It was about the story as much as it was about the game. Well, probably the gameplay even more, the atmosphere, and they wanted to focus on that sort of 70s B-movie horror flick scenario. I think that's the attitude I got with the beautiful backgrounds and lighting effects and textures and ugly, scary monsters. That's great. We can work with that, and they're going to keep pushing. Let's make a better monster. Let's make a more gruesome monster. Let's make a more tactical one. And you need to do that to compensate with your mechanics. You have to allow the player to adapt to that properly. So you need better mechanics. So
although Resident Evil was no slouch with lore either.
Oh yeah, there's all those crazy notes you could find and
the notes, all the secondary material, the animated movies, not the live action ones.
I didn't know there were animated Resident Evil movies.
CG movies, they're below the bar, but they do have certain things that tie certain installments of the games closer together.
Like, is there even a good live action Resident Evil movie? Like, I've heard the original is fine.
Nope, not a single one. Nope.
Nope.
Just keep going.
The less we say about the latest the animated Resident Evil movie, the better.
It's that bad, huh?
Well, the one that's upcoming is pretty bad narrative wise.
Doesn't that latest movie what was it called? Dead Island? Doesn't that take place after 8?
It takes place. I think I've read somewhere it takes place in 2015.
Oh,
the year 2015. So I don't know where that is narratively. I think it's before number 7. I think
it's at least after 7. Yeah.
Well, the reason why Dead Island is getting ridiculed right now is because
at least before 7. Yeah.
Right. So the reason why Dead Island is getting ridiculed right now online is because when they first released images of it, you saw Jill Valentine, who hasn't been seen since Resident Evil 5. Comparatively speaking,
First of all,
Right.
reusing the 3 remake model.
right, and people were making fun of that online. They were saying like, haha, she looks like she did from Resident Evil 3 Remake, so I guess she doesn't age, And then Capcom came out and said, yeah, no, you're right. She hasn't aged at all. And we're like, wait, what?
What? Wesker messed her up that bad in 5?
Apparently, and Capcom is now saying this is canon. Jill Valentine, Claire Redfield, and Rebecca Chambers, who have all been infected throughout the series, do not age anymore.
How about you fuck off, Capcom?
And us in the RE community was going, we were fucking kidding. We were making jokes.
Also,
And you're taking this seriously.
Wait, Leon's been infected by Las Plagas. What's the difference there?
The
I
difference
don't
is
know.
he got rid of his.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, he took it out.
yeah, fair point.
I mean, they changed
But
it in the remakes where he blacks out and Ashley manages to take it out of him, but ultimately it's the same. Like, that's actually kind of nice.
Yeah,
Like,
actually,
you're
right.
less,
They didn't have-
they made her where she isn't just completely useless in the remake.
Yeah.
but at the same time, still having her as like the sidekick, like the person in danger. Yeah,
Like, she's still a college student who's scared shitless about the situation she's in. She's just not going to be a useless, out of pain in the ass twat who screams every 4 seconds.
although although one of the last lines, like when they're getting away on the jet ski, it's like one of the last lines there when he says to Ashley sounds so woke. It's like no, you don't need my help. You clearly can take care of yourself. Nah, excuse me.
Yeah, that's kind of dumb, but at the same time, he's also trying to be nice.
Yeah, he's
That's
trying to let her
what
down, I guess.
That's what I take it as. Not any woke shit.
Like,
Yeah.
I think it's along the lines of, oh, trust me, I've had my fill of you. I do not want any more to do with it.
I mean, it's like at that moment, even in the original, that moment was meant to look back. It's like if you think Ashley had it bad, remember Leon from 2?
Yeah. Anyway,
Yeah, that's what that's meant to be. But
let's
that's
let's get back to it. Let's get back to it.
And a member for the Resident Evil series, of course. I'm not here to tell you that RE4 wasn't a bigger game than the originals. Survival horror is a smaller audience.
What was that comment earlier about, hey, notice RE2 had higher...
okay, yeah, we know.
Okay.
In
Sorry.
action. RE4's gameplay has more universal appeal. That's fine, I'm not complaining about that. But the fact of the matter is, the success of RE4 is hung over the original game's heads as some kind of official statement that their time was over and the genre simply had to change direction to stay relevant.
Who has ever said that? What idiot is hanging Resident Evil 4 over the old games like a carrot, saying, "Yeah, haha, this is better." That's some pretentious fanboy nonsense.
Yeah.
At least I never did it, and I started with 4. I'm just like, I never went on to the faces of people like the old. It's like, haha, this is the best game ever. No. What is this fanboy nonsense?
This is trying to understand or put words into the mouth of the creators for 4 and say, well, we're doing this now because we think X. It's like, what? How do you know?
I wouldn't be surprised if people like that exist out there, but I don't even think they're a minority. I just think it's just a couple people out there that do that because they're idiots.
Or trolls.
Or trolls, exactly. Yes, did the game move the series forward? Yes, but
Yeah.
I find it hard to believe that there was that many people lording it over classic RE fans. But that's neither here nor there.
Yep.
Sabotage the RE1 remake with
Sabotage.
exclusivity, it
What?
would have sold way better.
Where do you get no? Okay, let's just move on from this. All I'm gonna say is this wasn't sabotage. Things happened exactly as they planned, despite
Like,
the
you could
sales
argue
numbers.
it's not a great business decision, but that's not sabotage. That's just a company making a bad decision.
And it's not even a bad decision. Again, the whole point
Like,
of the
it's just
Capcom 5 was to broaden
Arguably
the audience.
one, but it brought in more people to the series and to prepare it for Resident Evil 4.
Now think of the real intention of the Capcom 5. Think of it as like the opposite of what companies do now, where they where they appeal to the broader audience. No, Capcom took the step forward and broadened their audience for Resident Evil themselves with the Capcom 5. And it worked. So, I don't know where you're getting Sabotage from.
After being remastered and released for PS3 in 2014, finally arriving on a Sony console where it belonged, it racked up almost 4 million right there. And another.
So you have me to play it right now.
So yes, they did do what he's talking. What did it take them almost a decade to do it? Yes, but they did it.
Also, it's weird that your Biohazard for the Wii shows the Japanese title.
Well, the fandom site says that whenever a game says Biohazard, it came out only in Japan.
Okay, yeah, like I said, it's called Resident Evil is called Biohazard in Japan.
I think that was part of. I think that what was it? That was part of the new play control thing that the Wii did.
Something like that.
And the one remake and 0 were part of the new play control thing, but they were only in Japan.
Is that with the nunchuck with the aiming?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, you aim? Wait, I don't think I don't think the Wii versions of 1 remake and 0 had that exactly, but they were on the Wii, at least in Japan.
Oh, they didn't.
But again, this right here, despite the time gap, they did do what Mayo is saying. They did put it on Sony eventually. So I'm just like, what else has he got?
Not to mention that that the timing of this 2014, it probably had a better advantage making sales there than being immediately ported at the time it came out.
Yeah, because the 7th generation is when gaming was at least starting to become fully mainstream, which made it easier to what they wanted to do with the Capcom 5, like to broaden the audience themselves, like to make that audience bigger by virtue of putting their games on more systems and letting people decide for themselves.
And this is just it just boils down to a porting argument on his part that any of the entries that Capcom could have boosted the sales to where they wanted if they just ported it, but he doesn't make that argument with the other ones that didn't do as well.
Yeah,
he just argues for RE Remake.
And we're not talking about a port for a remaster. A remaster just doesn't port. It does a bunch of upgrades. It changes elements. It adds elements. So if you want to get into the
you're right. Yeah,
remaster does.
Yeah, the details are all there because the fans who know better say, "Wow, they really added a lot of stuff." And we can look at Dead Space and what they did there and why it was popular and why it wasn't. So he's leaving out a bit of the detail why the remaster was selling so well.
Yeah, I didn't even catch. Yeah, it's right. It's a remaster, not a straight port.
Well, it should be obvious that it sold this well. On top of it being easier to appeal to more people during that generation, also the fact that the one remake had already become the cult classic we know it for being now. So it was going to get those sales no matter what.
Okay.
Another total sales right up there with the big boy RE2 from 1998. If it had come out on PS2 originally, these totals today would be closer to 9 or 10 million.
How do you get that? How
do you know?
That's assuming a lot.
Again, just a tad bit of that petty PS2 PlayStation fanboy seeping back in with his tone.
Yeah, it's like, look, I like the PlayStation. I am a Sony fan, but that's just petty. Like, yeah, it's great that Resident Evil, the remake, got the HD remaster on PS3, Steam, and presumably the Xbox 360. Oh, show the Xbox 360 numbers up there, buddy boy.
Let me just double. No, I don't think it is on the 360.
Really?
Still not mentioned 0.
He has not mentioned 0, which is a prequel, apparently.
Yes,
it is.
Total sales for 0, if he doesn't mention it, just over 5 million.
Pretty impressive.
Lifetime.
Wow.
Lifetime. And it made the most of its sales on Xbox One, on PC, and on PS3 and 4.
It was originally supposed to be on the GameCube, not GameCube, N64.
We did mention that earlier, but it's like I think that was just it was mainly because of the N64 hardware limitations.
It was going to be an N64 exclusive, and
the N64 was notorious with that shit.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, it's like these games were ultimately successful at the end of the day. It's like, obviously, yeah. Could you say these were mistakes made with the old versions? Like, maybe, but they executed their plan the way they wanted to, and ultimately they garnered a lot more people to be fans of Resident Evil, which was the plan all along since the Capcom 5.
And we could have had a very. I imagine a world where instead of RE4's success obliterating the relevance of classic survival horror in the eyes of the public, we get to see both directions continue forward with success and confidence. I see RE4 releasing to accolades and blockbuster legendary success as a revolutionary and lucrative title, leading to more action-based sequels, while at the same time continuing with PlayStation 2 era masterful remakes of RE2 and RE3, made with passionate attention to detail, also seeing their own solid financial success.
Isn't that what Revelations was in the first place?
I have no idea.
To harken back to classic Resident Evil?
He doesn't even say, like, Capcom continuing with classic style. He specifically says the 2 and 3 getting remade how he wanted them to.
Yeah, this again more pettiness on his part that he didn't get those remakes back then. But anyway,
Both survival horror and new action horror existing together. I see a gaming world not tossing aside a beloved genre and calling it antiquated and in need of an overhaul, simply because Capcom messed up with an exclusivity deal.
No.
I see a franchise able to stay strong and stick to its roots, and give confidence to other developers to keep classic survival horror alive during the toughest of times, as games seem to be just brown military shooters and rhythm games to sell you plastic peripherals.
What year did this video come out in?
This came out like a week ago.
What the fuck is he smoking?
jeez, like, and also like punching down on shooters and
if this was 20 teens, I would agree with that because that was the era of brown and gray military shooters and Guitar Hero.
He's referring to
video,
that time.
If I can say, this video feels so much like it was made right after the 3 remake came out.
This feels like it was made in like 2016.
It's just, yeah, it says classic survival horror was cast aside.
At the earliest, like,
yeah.
No, because what year did this is actually bafflingly stupid.
Again, this feels like it was made right off the heels of the reception to RE3 remake, where it's like, oh, the remake didn't come out all that good because they cut content. It's like I'm gonna rag on Resident Evil 4 in response.
I've already said that the 4 remake is really good. Like, it plays like a true survival horror. Survival horror didn't go anywhere, buddy.
Yeah, it was subdued for a little while, but it still came back regardless.
It was still around if you knew what to look for.
Exactly.
What do you think, Mike?
Mike's just having a stroke over there.
Is Mayo talking garbage?
Asleep the whole time.
Not asleep. Not asleep.
Do you want this world he is imagining?
Why can't we just have both?
Yeah.
I mean, because ultimately Capcom was stupid.
Every game studio
like Resident Evil, Capcom became
experience. They've all made dumb decisions.
Yeah.
All right, let's keep going.
I see years of not having to feel like a genre I love simply has no place, and instead getting quality titles that capture the real survival horror spirit, whether they be made by Capcom or someone else.
I mean, we are now.
Yeah, just when he says real survival horror, he's talking specifically about RE1 and 2 and 3 and the fixed cameras, because you still had games that were closer to survival horror coming out after 4.
Camera was due to the lack of analog control. It was a literal hardware limitation.
Yeah, I don't. It's just he talks a lot like
to build the claustrophobic, tense nature of Resident Evil. Guess what? In the 4 remake, there's still that tense claustrophobic feeling where you're in tight corridors where you just know something's going to pop out of a wall and eat your face.
No, even in the original, that's still there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, you still have the tense, claustrophobic nature of, I know something's coming, where are you?
Admittedly better these days. RE2 Remakes showed us that survival horror can still be huge in the AAA scene. And
Didn't 7
Thank
also
you
show
for
that?
saying- 7, yeah, people say 7's really good. I have 7, just haven't played it.
Also, Evil Within came out before. Yeah, that's just, I'm being
Yeah, yeah.
nitpicky-ish, but yeah.
there's a wonderful indie scene full of imaginative and fun experiences built on classic survival horror tradition.
Okay.
Now he mentions the indie scene. Okay. Near the end of the video.
Wait, what's
But
he
okay,
on screen? What is he on screen?
Like now he bringing up. It's like
Come on!
now he's bringing up indie
Don't
games.
use that
on that.
one for an
Pretty sure I can do
example.
What's the
God
problem?
damn you!
Well, Mike just woke up.
God damn you! Don't use Signalis as a fucking example. A tribute to Resident Evil. God fucking damn it!
Tortles, Darkwood, Signalis.
What about
Elisa,
Lisa? God damn you!
How is this classic survival?
Fucking the other thing. Oh, I'm so glad that let's use Signalis. Oh, the fucking DS looking thing. Look, guys, let's make Resident Evil a tribute thing by not having it be like Resident Evil. Oh, isn't that just dandy?
Well, good to see you've woken up, Mike.
I'm so
Okay.
fucking tired whenever they do this shit.
I need a drink.
I have no idea what this is called because reverse image searching isn't giving me anything.
I think Mike wants you to buy it.
By what?
It's a fucking fucking.
Oh, my lovely.
It's like the Tormented Souls one. It's like, it's all right, but it's like the other one manages to actually capture the spirit and the look and the gameplay of it.
Okay, as much crap as I give Last of Us Part 2, that plays like a survival horror.
Yeah, even that.
Yeah.
And that's
Even that's a good example of a survival horror because you know what? When you go into the freaking nests and hives, when those things running around and you have stalkers that you cannot listen to track them down to, that's fucking terrifying. Because they're fast, they're hard to see. You can't stop and listen to where they're running around to, and they'll jump out of a fucking corner and blindside you. It's actually tense and terrifying.
Anywho.
Actually, I want a Last of Us spin-off
no.
where it's actually a survival horror, where it's not focusing on Joel, Ellie, or whatever the thing's name was.
Anyway.
Classic horror, you can find it. For a long time, it felt like you couldn't. So I'm happy now, but I'm sad when I think about what could have been. The quality titles we could have been getting through the late 2000s, if only Capcom hadn't screwed up so bad
What if
with
they
the GameCube
sucked?
deal. So did RE4 save the Resident Evil franchise from the abyss?
Yes.
At least by a technicality, if not outright, yes.
In a way, but not in the way that people tend to claim it did.
Which
And
is
that
what?
would be. Please
Just
explain.
explain what you mean by that.
Yeah.
Defend your statement. Like, if you have an argument, I'll listen. Defend your statement.
We would,
Yeah, exactly.
we would not have, the modern Resident Evil games without 4. So
Exactly.
It would,
Yeah.
that might
Which you
still-
point out make huge numbers.
Yeah, which
again-
might still be around, but it'd be a completely different state.
Yeah, and again, looking all the way back to when the game was first being developed, it was going to go into the same traditional survival horror, stance as the rest of the series. But over the course of that development, Mikami and the developers realized that they did have that without innovation, they were going to stagnate enough to kill the series off. Hence why we have Resident Evil 4 now in its
Right.
current form,
And the
pre-remake.
The concept of this game or game series was to become a franchise, not just a video game series, but other things as well. So you have to think very large in order to get there, and you can't just do that on one idea. The same with Mario. If Mario is just a side-scroller game where you jump up and down up on colorful ducks, what are they called? Turtles?
Goombas?
Oh,
Goombas?
and the
Turtles,
Goombas,
Yeah.
yeah.
So it evolved beyond that. It has versions, various genres that people love now. So that's the concept. They're building their own brand. It's not just a two-off series. and they knew they had to innovate. Everyone knows they had to innovate, so they did.
Well, the things like Mario's, like the core tenets of its fundamental design, held a lot better than compared to Resident Evil, I would say, because Mario was able to try out a whole hell of a lot of things without losing its identity. And with what he said about with what Mayo said about Resident Evil doing both sides of the coin at the same time, Mario actually did that. Mario did 2D and 3D for the longest time and still stayed strong.
When you look at like Metroid, I think Metroid would have been fine as a scroller whether or not Metroid Prime came along. That just gives you another way to experience this is what we say about Resident Evil. If Resident Evil came out with an adventure platformer, that'd be different. Like if you're playing like a Lara Croft game or whatever.
I don't even know how that would work.
Yeah, I don't know either, but people would still want to try it because it has the brand.
People generally are willing to give these kinds of new ideas a chance.
Nothing else, it would be a curiosity. Like, how would a Resident Evil platformer play?
Maybe I think the closest thing would be Tomb Raider, just to keep it simple.
I could see that working where you much focus on a more linear design structure, focus less on survival, more on just get to the end of the level as you're trying to
zero and more on exploration, I guess.
Yeah,
maybe you're trying to escape Wesker's facility.
Well, the puzzles.
Maybe actually you could play as Ada, who's always been more acrobatic.
Right, but the idea...
She has her little SMG, she's got a handgun, and you're escaping Wesker's facility with a sample of whatever bioweapon he's made as she's working for the U.S. You know what? That could actually work.
The idea behind...
I just thought of a way that could work.
The puzzles, or rather the concept behind the progression in Resident Evil is you have a key, which opens a door, or it's always backwards. You find a locked door, you don't know what to do, so you have to travel back and find a key. Like, that's the general logic of these puzzles, whereas games like Uncharted... It's kind of like the level is a puzzle in some cases, or the set piece is a puzzle, like escaping the bus in the first scene of Uncharted 2. So, yeah, you could make it more cinematic. You could have more voice acting. You can do more cutscenes and what have you. It will become something its own creation. It will become its own thing after that. But that is the same concept with like Shin Megami Tensei or the Zelda games or what have you. So. It can do that if the creators have the inspiration and the drive and obviously the resources they have. Capcom can do all kinds of things. But do they want to? And will it sell? I don't know. I really don't know. So,
well, the question of if they wanted to, yes, the way things turned out up to in the lead up to 4 is exactly how they planned it.
Yeah, I think so.
It wasn't dying naturally because there wasn't an interested audience anymore. It was being killed by its own creators, ignoring the huge audience that was there in favor of a crappy exclusivity deal which tanked the sales of the series' finest entry, creating the narrative that the franchise was in desperate need of a makeover.
What? Who has ever peddled that narrative, as you call it? The series
argument that the remake of 1 being ported to PlayStation 2 would make more sales. It absolutely would.
Yes, it would have.
That's not what the guy wanted to do. Like, yeah, the argument's there. It would have made more sales had they ported it. Maybe they should have, but that's not what happened, and it still worked out in the end.
Yeah, they wanted to take the initiative and get more people into the series, and then once Resident Evil 4 hit and proved to be a success, they could then return the favor to the PlayStation fans by giving them Resident Evil 4 and unifying the fan base from there.
Yeah,
especially with the adding of separate ways.
Yeah, that too.
He seems to only be making this console war argument as opposed to saying, did this game bring the franchise back on track, or did it become so popular that it made more and more content? And the obvious answer is yes, and you could argue the sales, or you could argue the popularity, but this is a good thing. I think everyone's happy that 4 did well. I think everyone's happy 4 exists, and it's a fun game. If it wasn't a fun game, no one would care.
We wouldn't have the remake if it wasn't a fun game.
Well, yeah, I mean...
We wouldn't have anything after Resident Evil 4 if it wasn't fun and successful.
The fans are like, is this game fun? Yes, I want more. If it sells a lot of units, but it sucks, the fans are like, we don't care. And
it's like, there's enough out there to judge the game.
Yeah, it's kind of like Well, I was going to say Metal Gear Solid 2 or 4, but that's kind of a different story.
All those games aren't bad per se; they're just weird.
The marketing was weird.
That's Hideo
Yeah.
Kojima. He's a weird guy.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
kinda-
the games themselves aren't bad; they're just trippy as hell.
they're trying to pull the wool from under you while still giving you something to chew on, which is kind of a weird argument because why would you do that? But he did it twice. So yeah, fair enough. If you expect that from your developer or your publisher, then it's
Especially since Metal Gear 2 is about mass media manipulation to control the populace.
Oh, and look what's happening right now.
Upper Echelon Gaming had a video. Look up Screen Control by that guy.
Yeah, I'm
Really
just like,
good video series. Like, oh, that's terrifying.
yeah. Oh, looks back in Metal Gear Solid 2.
They could use freaking light pulse manipulation. You can't even detect to actually control and influence you to a degree. That's scary.
And with the way things are going now, that really does feel like we're getting there.
That's scary.
Yeah, and could
But
you?
that's a whole other argument. That's a whole other
Yeah.
thing. The point is,
That's a whole other story.
but yeah, the point is, Resident Evil made an impact. It made sales. It was received well. It was well needed innovation for the series, and everyone is okay with that.
Sweet. Man-made horrors beyond my comprehension.
Yeah.
He says it tanked the finest entry, but the sales were around what he claimed was fine for like the spin-offs at the time to make.
Hell, just for
Oh,
2002
quote-unquote spin-offs.
standards, it's getting 1.3 million sales of your game in 2000 was impressive.
By the standards of the time, the first 3 versions of Resident Evil 4, GameCube, PS2, and Wii were massively successful.
Hell, even today's standards, if you get a couple million sales, that's impressive.
Yeah, what was the standard?
yeah.
The standard at the time
Today-
was
Like,
Even today's standards,
it's like-
a couple million is good.
The general idea is that if you could at least break a million, that was a success. At
Yeah,
least a
if you-
million.
if you sold 1 million copies PS2 or GameCube, you would get a greatest hits release.
Yeah, it's like if you hit at least a million,
That's right.
okay, that too. The update.
Just
That's how
a million,
they did,
yeah.
That's how they released updated versions. Yeah,
I remember.
but I'm just
that.
like, yeah. If you could hit at least a million, that was fine enough. If you made more than that, that was excellent.
yeah, they had.
I think
And
that's the
Resident
whole
Evil 4
core
Resident
of
Evil
his
4 did
point.
Yeah, no.
His whole point is, yeah.
Those green
Yeah.
boxes or the white boxes that had the greatest hits release, and it was like $20 or whatever, and it was like, wow, I could
Yeah.
buy this.
Yeah,
thing.
for the PS2, it was the red tint
Yeah.
Greatest
for the
hits
thing.
collection.
Oh, yeah,
GameCube
yeah.
was
They brought that
GameCube
back in the
yellow.
PlayStation 4 era.
Yeah. PS2 was the red tint for the logo. GameCube was the yellow tint with the black logo, and Xbox was silver.
Although Xbox said it had like 2 or 3 different versions of their platinum hits, which was weird.
I think
That was
silver
also
was
your
one of
only
the-
way to get
It just
anything
made, like-
patched.
Yes, back then, not until the 7th generation.
Like
Hey,
when
these
you
loading
could-
times
when you
suck.
could-
Better hope it sells 1 million.
You say that, but that's literally what happened with Sonic 06. Despite
know.
how crap the game is, it sold at least 1 million on Xbox 360.
which is
You gotta-
hilarious. to me.
Got a platinum hits version. I'm just like, how is that even possible? But again, back to Resident Evil. It was
Yeah, the
successful.
video-
We know that.
Yeah, it's just he's saying they tanked the finest entry, and it makes him
No.
upset because that meant. Well, his opinion is that makes him upset because it meant 2 and 3 weren't going to get the same style remakes. But the fact is, they never planned that anyway.
Right.
That wasn't the plan. Like, yeah, they definitely could have, and it probably would have been a good idea.
This
If it
is
sold like
they
2
didn't do
million, it still wasn't going to happen.
yeah, this is like arguing why can't they release Final Fantasy VI or do a remake of Final Fantasy VI for the PC because it's the best entry because I said so, as opposed to saying is it the most fun game? Because we could objectively look at the gameplay of all the Resident Evil games and say this has the best mechanics, this has the best shooting mechanics, whatever the issues are. You can't really say that about all the Final Fantasies because they're always doing weird shit throughout the years.
Well, yeah,
So-
especially later on.
well, yeah, later on they're all different. So with
13,
Resident,
anyone?
Well, with Resident Evil, once you get to 4, it's like okay, this is the standard, and then they play around with setting and story and characters. And
Yeah, and then they build up from there.
yeah, exactly. So 1 to 3, its own beast. 4 and up is again its own creation. So
Yeah, it's the series moving forward. Yeah.
yeah. So that's normal. That's evolution.
Again, they weren't hindered by they weren't they were not hindered by the hardware limitations of the PlayStation 1 N64.
Yeah, exactly. So
they had dual analog. They had more. They had better camera angles to work with. They had more powerful hardware to work with. So naturally, it's going to change
when they have more ROM to store bigger levels, etc. Yeah. So if he's making a financial argument, he didn't do that. He just showed sales figures. That's not a financial argument. You're just saying, well, it sold more.
That's not the only factor for success. As we've said before, he never once brought up critical reception.
Right. So
yeah.
I go back to Final Fantasy 6 and 7. 7 was marketed up the wazoo. It was on frickin' TV. I saw commercials. It was nuts. 6, no one knows about it. No one even knew about Final Fantasy until 7 came out in most cases for gamers.
For some people, unfortunately, and it's sad that for some people the series starts with 7, which is
Exactly.
which is the whole reason why the pixel remasters of 1 through 6 exist in the first place.
So if we're talking,
I remember seeing Final Fantasy 9 marketing. I never saw anything about 8.
Yeah, that's true. So the argument has to come down to business. If he's going to say that, what was the marketing idea? How much did they spend to make it? How much did they spend to market it as well? Was it a financial? I think they were all financial successes, so that's not a huge problem there.
Final Fantasy,
Resident Evil.
Generally, yeah. There were we've seen the ups and downs throughout this video, and we have the page to prove that scaling of the sales.
Yeah,
but generally it was always bringing in the money.
If you're selling over 200,000 units and it took you about a year to make one game, that's really good in terms of your life cycle and how long it takes to make a game and how much it costs and all that stuff. You're paying game devs like 50 to 65K. They really don't get paid that much. So a team of 20, maybe 30. I don't know how big these teams are. Well, you can do the math and figure that out. So they'll turn a profit. And they sold millions of units. So was it dying? It was getting less innovative or was not doing much. 4 was the thing it had to do.
It was stagnating.
Thank you. 4 was the one it had to evolve into, and it did. And everyone knew how good it was. Even non-fans knew. Ooh, this looks like fun.
Yes.
It's like, wow, this is crazy. We've never seen something like it before, except compared to like 0 comes out and they're like, oh, they did this fixed camera thing again, but it's in a train.
So
all of this.
He had to make the argument on mechanics and gameplay or business and sales and marketing and all that jazz, but he hasn't done that. He just says, "I like 2. Why didn't 2 go to this? They would have made more money." It's like, yeah, they would have. You're right. So the argument is, did 4 bring the series back? It's like, yes, it did. Everything you showed us says yes. And he did not dispute that. So I'm like, what's the point of this video?
Yeah, it's like by the end of this, I watched it like twice. I was like, wait, what was he arguing? I still don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we got a minute left. Hopefully we'll just clean it up.
Big change in direction did of course have a massive effect. It turned a blockbuster series selling 5 to 6 million into a mega blockbuster series selling 15 million with RE5. The Resident Evil fanbase is much larger today than it ever would have been if RE4 hadn't taken the big risk.
Yeah, you see?
I'm definitely not denying that. Love or hate the action era of Resident Evil, it helped make the franchise a multi-generation phenomenon, and it led us to where we are today. And I hear all the time from fans of the action RE titles that take the time to go back to the classic survival horror trilogy and discover the magic and learn to love them too. I'm happy for that. So I don't want to come across as an RE4 hater or as denying that the action direction was more successful. My issue has always been the false narrative that Resident Evil was dead in the water and needed saving. That if RE4 hadn't gone for all-out action and had instead stuck with the slow, spooky tone and angular camera system, that somehow the series would have died out or something.
I agree.
That seems, at least on a basic level, that is true.
It would have sold a lot less. It would have been less innovative, because again, if the same thing comes out year after year, just with an updated engine, it's not going to work. You have to innovate. 20%.
Unless you're Call of Duty.
Well, okay, maybe. I don't know the Call of Duty series too well, but when you're talking about game design,
even that's starting to dwindle in sales.
Oh, really? When you're talking about like doing a sequel or doing something in the same style, 20 to 30% of your game design has to be new. There has to be something there that you're changing. And it could be an evolution. It could be an addition to something like, I don't know, your bullets do, I don't know. I'm bringing up Mass Effect because it's stupid. Because what they did was destroy the lore for the sake of gameplay. And the argument is, well, it's more fun gameplay. Sure, the shooting is tighter, but you're destroying the story in the process, but people don't care because it's a fun game, so whoop-de-doo, right? So you can do stuff like that and get away with it, provided it sells. If it sells, then you keep doing it, and you innovate again. The problem is with Mass Effect is it was supposed to be supposed to be a trilogy, and that was it. Whereas Resident Evil, they can keep making these games. People love the concept of Wesker being back as second, third, fourth, and 12th.
And just being an overacting campy ham who just chews every scene he's in.
It's supposed to be campy.
To be fair, he earned that status. Thank you very much.
Well,
I mean, no, I'm not just talking shit about Wesker. I love Albert Wesker, where he's just the way his actor does the inflections, it's just I can't take it seriously.
yeah.
They also didn't overuse Wesker either, which I can give.
Like he's in there just enough just to be a dick, and then it's
He's not in that. He's not in that. In terms of the series, he's not in that many games.
He just shows up just enough to where I can't even do his voice.
Like his big game 5 is actually the one where he's killed off.
Like he's somehow monotone and overacting. How do you do that? How do you be both monotone and overact?
You played Deus Ex, the original. Anyway, we're almost done. I think we pretty much say all we have to say. So
Yeah.
I don't believe that. And even if it had happened, it certainly wouldn't have been the game's fault. It would have been the fault of the exclusivity deal with the GameCube.
what?
Thank you for watching this video. I'm sure it'll be a contentious one. Comment below. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Okay.
I
You're
wanna
a
hear what
goddamn
everyone
idiot
has
is
to
what
say.
you are.
Unless you're someone who thinks classic survival horror games suck, then I couldn't care less. Bye.
Wow.
Okay. To be fair, I'll give that closing line. It's kind of funny.
All right. Let's see. Do we have any memes to look at? I have no idea. Mike,
Feelings.
Mike, you got
Bolt
any
thrower
All right.
underrated. I didn't like bolt thrower.
All right, we can go to memes and then look at that last thing that gave me in regards to what was that again? An IGN interview
That was an interview with Mikami and Kobayashi.
Kobayashi. Yeah, we can look at that.
I
I think we can close off the stream by looking at that.
Okay,
before we sign off.
we got you. You don't like the video. Leon,
Yeah,
please.
I did not like this video.
My sister's.
Yeah.
Oh my god. My sister's ovaries are drying up. She owns at least 3 cats. One of them is named Albert Whiskers. Please, Leon, you need to F my sister. Continue the Redfield bloodline.
That's a whole meme with the series at this point.
Oh,
God, that started back in the RE2 remake.
Yeah.
oh dear.
Yeah.
Although it was kind of a thing before, but it was just played off for laughs. It wasn't memed as hard as it was with this.
Yeah, not as much as this.
Not as hard, no.
Is
No,
this
definitely not.
the anime version of the same meme?
Oh, I love these comics.
Oh yeah.
They're
Leon's
great.
like on a date with Ada, and like Chris keeps intervening every time.
There's this one where it's Leon and Ada dating, and there's another one from the same person where it's what was it? Dante and Lady taking care of baby Nero.
Okay, that sounds very wholesome.
It is.
Oh my god. Leon is a complete moron, but okay, fair enough.
Yeah, he's a dork. He's socially
Yeah.
oblivious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what people like about him.
Leon, the bloodline. Oh my god.
How about-
Smug there.
How you doing?
MS Paint. Wow. All right. Oh, there's another. Guys, I can't read that.
Oh, hold on. Let me see if I can.
Hey,
Okay.
Look. Hey, look over here, strangers.
Huh?
Go on.
What? No.
No, don't look at him, Leon. So, you gotta buy something? Ah, he's just trying to sell us stuff. What'd you
Yeah.
think I was doing?
What you
Yeah.
buying? What you sell? Yeah, okay.
What are you
Like, what even is the shopkeeper's story in this
I
game?
think the closest we've ever come to an explanation that presumably he's infected with the plagas, but he still has control. So we try to able to get around.
In the remake, it's established those blue flames.
Yeah, his
plagas are
flame.
inactive around the blue flames, and he's always
Oh,
and he runs his store around the blue flames. So
okay.
Yeah.
But for the record, there was also a theory for the longest time before the remake where supposedly he was infected, but he regained control, and that he was apparently also Luis's grandfather. I'm just like, what?
Oh, I never heard that one.
All right, so Mike,
He's
this
just
is
kinda doing his own
another survival
Who is
horror.
this? Who is Alyssa?
It's an indie horror
Yeah, it's
game
an indie
inspired
game,
by
yeah.
Resident Evil.
Yeah, you see, it's like the indie scene kept classic survival horror going. I'm just like, he only barely mentioned that.
and
Like,
it
it's-
definitely
it's-
looks-
I
it
want
definitely
stuff like
looks it definitely looks like it was on the N64.
Yeah.
Is this recent or is this like 10 years ago?
Yeah, this is recent. Yeah.
Recent.
Oh, wow,
Recent.
that's
This thing took 5 to
Oh,
7
that's
years. to
recent.
make.
wow. Interesting.
Oh, that also reminds me of I forget the name of it, but it's also recent. It has like you're in a haunted house. It's like you're part of a TV crew that like investigates haunted houses.
Oh, it's
And
not
it's
like a puppet combo game.
Yeah,
Well,
something
you know
like
what?
that, but it was also recent.
The YouTuber Under the Mayo, I'd love to have a chat with him if we could, because he seems like a really cool guy, and he has very specific tastes in his things he's passionate about. I like those YouTubers that they're like honest, and he's more than open to talk to fans of.
Hopefully, yeah.
No, I mean,
Yeah.
definitely he would be. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I think we can.
He's very specific about what
Yeah.
he's like. He markets himself as like the Doom, Resident Evil, DMC guy.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think we're gonna look at this one last thing that's in the DM chat. Go if you can like explain what this is.
The
Oh,
Like the
this
interview.
is.
let me
Are you
bring that
looking?
up.
It's
Yeah, it's in the DM chat.
Okay, here we go.
It's an interview with IGN, I think, for Village. I think this
For Village?
interview was related to Village. Well, Kobayashi and I think Mikami's in it, but he's not in this snippet. But Kobayashi brings up Mikami, and IGN's talking like about RE4. No, wait, this might have been related to the RE4 remake. Sorry.
Okay. Let's
But they're
just-
talking, and IGN's asking, "Hey, we all love RE4, but why did RE4 change so much?" And
And then-
Kobayashi's telling why he and Mikami did it.
Yeah, he said, when it comes to the action, sometimes you're going to be attacked by 10 or 20 villagers, so of course you're going to run. If you're talking about the jump scares from the original Resident Evil, then yes, there are still those in the game. We still have scenes where things jump out and scare you, but there are not as much as the previous Resident Evil games, because we really wanted to put a focus on action. You sure this isn't for the original Resident Evil 4? From back then?
I think
It
it might
probably
be.
is.
It seems like it.
Yeah.
Because I'm reading it too, yeah.
Yeah, and then
I thought this
IGN...
was a remake.
Yeah, and then IGS asked further on, don't take this the wrong way because we absolutely adore Resident Evil 4, but why is it such a grand departure from the rest of the games? And then Kobayashi responds, there's Resident Evil 1, 2, 3, and Code Veronica. Well, you see, even in this interview, someone from Capcom is referring to Code Veronica as part of the main line. So, but anyway, there's 1, 2, 3, and Code Veronica. We've been pumping them out for the last 7 years or so. So yeah, this is for the original Resident Evil 4. The staff, which includes myself and of course Shinji Mikami, decided that we wanted to go in a new direction and recreate the series. We were tired of making the same stuff as well. We wanted to make something new and original, and that's how it started. And then this ends with, how is it still Resident Evil? And then of course Kobayashi responds, of course, for all the people who played Resident Evil and wanted something new, that was the reason we still wanted to redesign it. But we still feel it's Resident Evil. That's pretty much the best response you could give at that point in time.
Yeah, because Mayo
Yeah.
keeps going on about how it's all the GameCube deal's fault, but the actual devs said they got tired.
That the actual devs confirmed that this was the plan when it came to Resident Evil 4 for the whole series at that point.
I
So like that,
think that's pretty
this-
definitive. Yeah.
yeah, this is that. It's like everything up to 4. Like it's like in terms of the Capcom 5 deal, up to Resident Evil 4. Kobayashi literally saying, this is what we wanted to do, and we're grateful that we were able to do it. That's literally it.
Yeah,
Doesn't
I thought this was the interview was like associated with Village or the 4 remake because he's talking about in context of the time. So when he says the last 7 years, like that was their mindset. It's like we just did something for like the last.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then IGS asked further on, don't take this the wrong way because we absolutely adore Resident Evil 4, but why is it such a grand departure from the rest of the games? And then Kobayashi responds, of course, for all the people who played Resident Evil and wanted something new, that was the reason we still wanted to redesign it. But we still feel it's Resident Evil. That's pretty much the best response you could give at that point in time.
I
But I think this is for the original. But the point still stands though.
Okay. Well,
it's I hated the video so because it felt like he was leaving so much out.
Yeah,
Like,
being disingenuous, just only showing the numbers and not the critical reception. Being, in my opinion, a genuinely petty PS2 fanboy asshole by not
talking about what the devs wanted.
not considering what the devs wanted. And yes, this was what they wanted to do, and they were able to do it. It's just it came off as a bit pretentious. But I feel like that if we, like Smudge said, if we sat down and had a more in-depth discussion about this, I think we could nail something down.
Agreed.
I think Mayo would probably agree to do it.
yeah. Well, he has a few other interests, but yeah, he has very specific tastes in gaming, and it's very clear. So yeah, no, he'd be a good guy to talk to, for sure. So thanks.
Maybe
guys.
at some point, yeah.
That was very not focused, but again, these videos are good from Mayo. I like them, even if they're gets his facts up in the air or he's biased towards a certain idea. We could probably have a chat with him. He's not crazy like some of the other people we cover, and it would be fun. But hey, that was our Saturday. Thanks, guys, for tuning in. We will talk to you hopefully soon. I don't know what's up for Anime Day or if we're having a video tomorrow. I hope my electricity is still on tomorrow.
Well, Anime Day's on Monday, so
I know.
I think guys said there was an RPG talk
said on
tomorrow.
Sunday. Yeah, the JRPG talk
I hope
is
so.
tomorrow.
I
that
hope
too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
Make sure.
Hopefully.
Because some people had different schedules. We have to make sure it was all set up.
Yeah, one of the mods was talk with me about that. It's like I was fine if it would have been on any day. It's like that's life, but if it's tomorrow, then let's do it.
All right, guys.
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
If it works out tomorrow, we'll start our RPG talk then. We will talk to you soon. Have yourself a great evening. And keep the suggestions coming. Keep the voting going. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Bye. Have a wonderful time.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
We got to the root of the problem.
Boo.